Welcome, everybody, to the special February State Board meeting. We have the agenda in front of you. I need a motion for the agenda to be approved.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Brooke and seconded by Cindy. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Move on to public comment. The state board's agenda is full and I'll place a maximum of 30 minutes for public comment. I'll give each speaker 5 minutes or 3 minutes if there are a large number of speakers. At the end of your allotted time, I'll ask you to conclude and the board will move on to the next speaker. The department will not respond to public comment aside from requesting clarification. The department may place a topic raised in public comment on a future agenda. A topic from public comment that is not related to an item on today's agenda will not be addressed at today's meeting. Do we have anybody for public comment today?
Good morning, members of the public. If you wish to address the board, please use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you are calling in, you can press *9 to raise your hand through your phone. Again, if you want to address the board, use the raise hand feature in Zoom. Otherwise, looks like we have none today.
Okay, we'll move on to the director's report.
Thank you, President, Vice President, and members of the State Board. Good morning, and as always, thanks to each of you for your service on incredibly important board. So we have a number of updates and exciting progress to share with you today. As discussed at the board's last meeting, the Iowa Department of Education is required to update its ESSA state accountability plan because those goals and targets currently articulated do not reflect current performance of students and parts of the plan do not reflect current practice. Additionally, the department is considering changes to the accountability plan that will better align with our stated foundational principles formed in consultation. And those are to be consistently rigorous, reliable, and fair in our accountability system, that the accountability system supports schools in continuous improvement, that the accountability system reflects high expectations for all students, that it is easily understood, and that it incentivizes evidence-based best practices. So in updating our proposed accountability system, the department conducted extensive modeling to ensure that the system would be rigorous, reliable, and fair. And then the department leadership conducted initial consultation with all superintendents at each of the 9 regional superintendents meetings with nearly 400 curriculum and instructional leaders, members of the State Board of Education, executive leadership of major public education associations, and AEA executive leadership. And then our next step was to issue a statewide survey to receive broader input. And that survey concluded last week, and we're currently processing and reviewing all feedback that was submitted.
Was there a lot of feedbacks?
There were over 1,447 responses. So we're excited about that engagement and of course appreciate all our partners who helped to widely disseminate that survey. I also just want to note that informed by consultation, the survey reflected multiple updates to the initial proposal that was first presented to the board. Those changes are really 3 core components. One was the inclusion of the 5-year graduation rate in addition to the 4-year adjusted cohort graduation rate. 2 was updating how targeted support and improvement schools, or TSI schools, were incorporated into the school rating categories. And the 3rd was use of a criterion-based system to determine school rating categories to ensure that based on those criteria, any school could be an exceptional school. Any school could be designated as a high-performing school as opposed to the current bell curve system that is utilized. So of those 1,447 responses, the majority of those were from educators and from parents. So about 880 of those responses were from educators and parents, which we were thrilled to see. There was overall consensus that the proposed changes, with an average of 3.6 out of a 5-point scale, were aligned to the stated foundational principles. So we were excited about that feedback. There's also robust comment in the feedback that we are taking time to thoroughly review. Any questions on that of our
What is
update
that submitted to the federal government?
later this month?
Okay.
And then will the ratings for the schools start like from zero? Because there, there's some schools that have been in, continuous improvement or whatever for a certain number of years. Will that, since it sounds like things are going to change a little bit, does it start over again, or is it just kind of continued? And then they're like different standards or?
That's a great question. Thank you. So based on the time, the next step is submission to the U.S. Department of Education for review and approval. So depending on their timeline for review and approval, the proposed changes to the accountability system could be implemented in the fall of 2024.
Okay.
Yeah. Any additional questions? Okay. The next major update that we're excited to share is that we are currently in the process of reviewing both our math and our ELA standards, informed by the feedback of educators, administrators, higher education industry, and families. So for the math standards, the department math consultants, Jody Vanderloo and April Forts, as well as Stephanie Rosenberg Wager, met with dozens of educators in the winter to inform initial updates. We just recently concluded 5 listening sessions that were held in person across the state between January 17th and January 25th. And then a survey requesting additional public comment on the proposed math standards was conducted, and that survey just closed last week. We received over 300 responses to that survey regarding the proposed math standards revision. And we are also currently processing that feedback with expert focus groups, as well as the final review committee that represents all stakeholders, again, educators, administrators, higher education industry, and families. And based on that work, the department will potentially bring before the board a proposed update to the math standards as soon as the April or even the March meeting. Please note that the math standards were adopted in 2010 initially. And then regarding our ELA standards, which were also adopted in 2010, the department recently put out a call for educators, administrators, and content experts, especially those with expertise or backgrounds in the science of reading, to review the state's ELA standards and to provide suggestions for revisions. That application is currently live. It closes at the end of next week, so Sunday, February 18th. And we appreciate all those interested in serving Iowa students and teachers in this capacity. And then also let me pause there. Are there any questions related to the standards?
Just the cycle for reviewing, that's like 13 years since is there a cycle that's quicker than that, or is that standard operating procedure?
And we've had some discussion about this in previous meetings. Generally, states are on at least a 5-year cycle, and we intend to institute cyclical revisions. They're critically important. And then continuing with our efforts in literacy and evidence-based reading instruction, I also want to provide you a quick update on the LETRS professional development. So as of yesterday, there were about 2,479 teachers and administrators who had enrolled in LETRS training for cohort 1 and 2, which began in January and March of this year respectively. And then in addition to cohort 2, the department is now opening up for enrollment the 3rd cohort of LETRS training, which will begin in August of 2024. And then regarding EVOS, which we've also talked about in these board meetings, last month, the department also expanded the opportunity to access classroom level data in the EVOS system statewide to all school districts and to all schools. About 136 school districts have registered to attend a roster verification webinar, and then EVOS experts and the department team are scheduling 6 in-person workshops to be held throughout this month, February, and March across the state. So again, the purpose of this opportunity is to support school districts in examining student achievement and growth across schools, across classrooms, across student groups, and then to help them with that information to make informed decisions about curriculum, investments, interventions, instructional strategies, programs, and continuous improvement plans. And then teachers have also used this tool to better understand the academic needs of students before they enter their classroom, to differentiate instruction for all students and also to monitor student progress. So this is a critical part of our partnership and our support of all school districts and education leaders in their efforts to improve grade level proficiency, to close achievement gaps, and of course, to meet the needs of all students. And then finally, just briefly, this month is National CTE Month, and we have had some incredible celebrations of the CTE opportunities across the state. About 107,000 students participate in CTE in Iowa. That's about 2 and 3 high school students, which we're very proud of. We also met with student leaders representing each of Iowa's 8 CTSOs this week. And last year we had record participation in CTSOs with nearly 30,000, so 29,196 students participating in a CTSO aligned to their program of study. And then last month, the department also hosted its first ever agricultural education summit. That was held in January, and it was a great opportunity to really accelerate and celebrate the progress that's been made towards our All-In for Ag Ed goals. And then last month, we had the privilege of joining the 9th Annual Emerging Educators Academy. That event is organized by former Iowa Teachers of the Year to celebrate new teachers who are choosing this honored profession. There were more than 100 first-year and new educators, as well as current students in teacher preparation programs and their mentors from across the state in attendance. And it was an all-star agenda with Iowa Teachers of the Year and finalists, including the 2023 Teacher of the Year, Crystal Colbert, the 2024 Teacher of the Year, Ann Minks, who they'll meet later today, the 2023 National Teacher of the Year of Oklahoma, Rebecca Peterson, and our own National Teacher of the Year from 2010, Sarah Brown Westling. So that was a wonderful day, and look forward to continuing to support that important Emerging Educators Academy opportunity. And then internally, just recently, the STEM team received an award from the Iowa Department of Natural Resources to help expand teacher externship opportunities and environmental and natural resource host sites throughout Iowa. And as a part of our continued alignment updates, we were really excited to welcome the Bureau of Iowa College Aid into the Grimes office building this past month. This has been a months-long process, and we thank everybody for their incredible work to make it smooth, and is one of the final steps in our larger alignment process across the department. So we're excited to have them here in Grimes, and hope that you can also meet some of the Iowa College Aid team members here today as well.
So how many members are there of that team? Approximately.
Under 30.
So it takes up a chunk of space, so.
It's wonderful because they're situated with the Bureau of Community Colleges and Post-Secondary Readiness. So having the physical proximity is even more conducive to our collaboration and continued collaboration.
So remind me, did we name a director of the Division of Innovation? And then I know there was also a position in the STEM group, kind of a, I don't know, resource role or something like that. Yeah.
We are concluding those processes. We are
Okay.
currently, we are in the very, very final stages. So we hope to have a announcement even in the coming couple of days. So looking forward to that.
Okay.
Questions? All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Brooke, second by Cass. Just to comment, I'm assuming that the minutes from the January meeting will be approved next month then. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, Oakmont Charter School contract.
Hey, I'm Janet Boyd, School Improvement Consultant with the Department of Education. Thomas is. We also have folks from Oakmont. So I'll go ahead and introduce them. We have Chris Byam. He is the newly appointed Executive Director for Great Oak Charter School. We should have Chris, I'm going to botch her name, Gerlacy Worrell. She should be on. Yeah, they've got them on. Maybe everybody. We've got Demetrios and Jerry. Is Chris there too with you? Yeah, we've got them promoted on Zoom. So what we have, this is a board action. What we're recommending is that the board approve the contract with the school name is Great Oak. The charter management organization is Oakmont. And there's a little history there on the executive summary. This was one of the ones approved January 11th. Basically, your packet, it's the summary and the contract. That's what's there.
May I ask a few questions?
Yes,
That's what I was
please.
waiting for.
If I might, members of the board, this is a negotiation. So this is a back and forth. So if you have changes that you would like to ask or questions, you're always in order. The documents are always subject to improvements, and this is a negotiation, so negotiate.
Well, I guess, as a general comment, a couple of us, I guess as a general comment, these are pretty much, they're not cookie cutter contracts. They're all kind of, different, in format, and perhaps in some things are mentioned and some not in some of the contracts. Is there a way to have a template or a standard contract that we would all be familiar with, and then people could submit changes to us if they want them? Because, I don't know how many of these we're going to get, but it seems like we're going to have a lot of different contracts that may say different things occasionally. Oh, is that something we can work toward? I'm not saying now, but
For next
work
round.
toward that.
And thank you for the observation. We've had that discussion internally, including about required or suggested templates, a template of a scoring rubric. These are quite different, and from some of the contracts, you can tell they've been grabbed from other states. We've had discussions about what needs to be in the contract. Does the contract restate statutory requirements? Or are those just assumed terms? So I think that this is a worthwhile discussion to go forward with. We've had it internally and with individual board members. It's just finding what's the third bowl of porridge. How much can we require? How much can the board not require? I think a sample template is something that has been suggested internally, and I think would be something to consider.
It might also help the charter schools in knowing what
Yes.
our at least minimum expectation.
It's a challenge when all the contracts are differently formatted and different information appearing. And I just want to make sure that whatever we decide as a board to approve or not approve as far as contracts or pieces of contracts, that it's fair to one and all, and everybody has that opportunity. If it's more standardized, whether it's a recommendation or how we can proceed, it was a challenge because I'm not sure, was this in this contract too, or is this in that contract? Is it everything within scope? And so I guess we rely on Janet to assure us that it is, but
We do have a whole team of folks here at the department that have looked at these contracts and tried to make sure that they align with the code, but they are different. And they're, as Thomas had said, we have had internal discussions about a template of sorts. There are organizations that have those available. So, that I would like to recognize Barbara Olin and Stacy Stokes and Tina Whaler and Cassandra Klein, all folks that have, looked at the contracts and helped, try to get things Iowaized. So
Do other states have templates?
Yes.
Okay.
I couldn't off the top of my head tell you.
Do the folks who reviewed this, would you be benefited at the?
Standardized template.
Okay, all right.
I think that'd be helpful, especially for, because some entities, probably have, I mean, some of these organizations have schools in other places, but, there might be some who, like there's one that, doesn't. And so for one starting out, I mean, it's very hard to draft a contract like this or to know what terms need to be in there. And so it's kind of, you're starting at a disadvantage, so just kind of base level everyone. It would be nice just to say, like, here are the terms that need to be in there. Non-negotiables. And then the rest we can negotiate on.
Unit, could you provide some additional context around a model template being provided, but it need to be optional in its use?
Yes, and I would defer, of course, to legal counsel. Our code doesn't say that I hope I'm going to say this right, Thomas, but our code doesn't require that of us. And I, so that's why it would be optional.
So an optional template was provided.
Yes. And we also worked, the other entity that helped with this contract development was the coalition, the Iowa Coalition for Public Charter Schools, and Mike Uglay, who you met last in January. He has been very helpful to upstarts. The new school in Cedar Rapids, they're starting from scratch, basically. The other schools are managed by CMOs.
So they probably have access to, they have more resources probably.
Have experience.
Exactly, yeah. So even though so you can provide a template, but they're just not required by law to use it. Okay.
And too, in this process, they submitted a contract to us. We worked, we had staff that looked at it, made suggestions. We went back and forth. So we worked with them.
Is there stuff from an Iowa perspective that has to be I'm assuming that there are things that have to be from an Iowa, so. Is that presented to them at all? Just being like, this is non-negotiable. These are the things that actually have to be in the contract, or is it you just kind of go back and forth, and then just putting that stuff in? Because I guess in a template, you could just say these are the things that actually have to be in there, and then they could drop that into.
56E would probably be,
Reference, yeah.
in chapter 19, the things. The one thing that we, that weren't in any of sample contracts that were part of the application was the performance framework. So we have to have a performance framework, and that's in 256E and chapter 19. And so that was one of I would say one of the bigger items that I had to work through, because that's not necessarily required in other states.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Is there anything else that you guys can think of that we?
Our team really did focus on the content piece. Sandra's team, the financial piece.
That makes sense.
Thomas is the same, the legal piece. We don't have all the expertise in one place, so that's why we're working really as a team, trying to make sure we have all parts covered.
And the perspective about what would be air quotes required differs based on the question you're asking. From my perspective, it's not necessary to recite statutory text in a contract because the law is self-executing. Others might see that statutory text as a way to sort of communicate expectations to end users. So they don't have to go to the Iowa code to look up a legal requirement. So I think as this template is developed, and I'm taking the board's temperature that probably one should.
Maybe
We'll have
especially
that
for those who are
discussion
not
of,
like,
yeah, we'll have that
Yeah.
discussion with current and future charter schools,
okay,
colleagues from other states about if something's in the sample template, sample contract, why is it there? Does it serve a legal purpose, a fiscal purpose, a program purpose, communication to your public purpose?
okay.
Um,
Because it probably looks different maybe with schools who are more familiar. I mean, because a lot of these schools aren't familiar maybe necessarily with Iowa law and things of it. So I mean,
there's some things that Dr. Klein and I and the team have identified where we're going to make some suggestions today.
okay.
So we don't have the statutory ability to require a template. Is that, okay, is that something that could be maybe proposed next legislative session as an update?
Let's workshop that because.
Well, I'm just saying.
Yes, it's
It's, the water's under the bridge for this year, but in future years.
Okay, go into rules.
Well,
That was fun.
Oh, isn't that?
okay, so we'll refocus. Thank you for the comments, but I think our concerns about a template would be, I guess, well spoken. Janet, what else do you have for us with this contract?
I think it stands, unless you want, Thomas, do you want to make the suggestions that were made?
So there is some language in the contract that Dr. Klein and I have identified regarding student fees in the contract with the CMO. I'll speak to the fees issue because I'm more fluent in that. And my colleague can speak to the contract with the Charter Management Organization. Section 10.5 in the contract. I'm gonna head to the table so I'm more easily heard. 10.5 in the contract is the language on fees. And there's some ambiguity in that language that would suggest that certain fees that otherwise would not be permissible under Iowa law could be charged. The statute says shall be tuition free and free of application fees. Under Iowa law, being tuition free means that there are certain types of fees that are unauthorized. So you can't charge a fee for athletics. There's no pay to play in Iowa. If you're an athlete, you can't be charged an athletics participation fee as you could in other states. Field trips of their curricular, if they're related to the extracurricular or co-curricular activities. So in this section 10.5, there's some savings clauses to the extent otherwise permissible by law. They wouldn't be permissible, so that extent is zero. But there's some language that I think Dr. Klein and I would propose the board and Oakmont Charter agree to revise so it's abundantly clear that if it's not a permissible fee in Iowa because it is covered in tuition, which in these schools must be tuition free, that it's abundantly clear. Dr. Klein might have some better ways to phrase that, but that's my legal concern. The potential there's enough savings clauses in there, but the potential for confusion that folks think that fees should be charged. So with that, turn it over to Dr. Klein and Janet, back to the people who actually know what they're talking about, for suggested language for the boards and Oakmont's consideration.
I believe that we could just, can we?
Strike the rest.
Strike the rest of it. So in 10.5, there is can you see where it starts with all and it's not capitalized?
Yes.
We would propose that the rest of that section be struck. So that it's just the first, I think, 2 sentences there. So that there's no confusion with field trips. Because your field trip would generally be considered part of the instructional program.
What about the part that Thomas references says to the extent permitted by law? Is that going to stay in there or? The sentence before the striking. Sorry, I should be more clear.
Yeah.
That would stay because there are some permissible fees. So if I'm in wood shop and I get the basic woods, that basic woods that they provide for wood shop has to be free to me. But if I want to upgrade to like a harder wood or like walnut versus balsa, that upgrade is a permissible fee. So to the extent otherwise permitted by law, there are certain additional fees that schools could charge. Lost ID fees. I think I paid a few of those. So those permissible fees that to the extent otherwise permitted by law would sort of pull those in as they would for any public school.
But are those 2 examples you just gave, Thomas, workbooks, textbooks, instructional materials, or classroom supplies? Because it seems to be limited to fees to the extent permitted by law for those, not like losing an ID. I don't think that's instructional materials. I don't know. I mean, I know I'm getting grainy here, but
I think, if that's
maybe take out the last part, just to the extent permitted by law. Why do we need the modifier at the end, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, because there's other fees that could be collected besides
Yeah.
those that are listed. Yeah.
Charge a reasonable fee per student, period.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree. I like that change.
right after fee.
Well, maybe per student,
Per student.
after per student is what right before 4.
And then that would resolve my concerns. And then the second concern, I stated it earlier, but I'm not the one to explain it since I don't know what I'm talking about. So Dr. Klein will do that.
Sure. This is section 12.2. This is about the management contract with the charter school management organization. And this is a conversation you may recall having previously. Even though the charter school management organization oftentimes helps identify opportunities for potential charter schools being opened up in Iowa or being opened up, it is important that the governing board maintain their own authority separate from the charter school management organization. So in this contract, 12.2 is requiring the school to enter into a contract with the charter school management organization. And I would propose that go from a will to a may. They have the authority to do it already, but if they want the language in the contract, it would just be to allow them to make that decision on their own as a governing board and not require them to.
So then there's no temporal component. They can do it or not and whenever.
I think in this case, it's voluntary but inevitable. But it would be an inaccurate statement of law to say that it's required. No founding group, no school board is required to use a management organization.
I mean, so I'd ask the question, do we even need 12.2? Did we just make it irrelevant?
We would not require it if we were to create a charter school template, but if they want it in the contract, we are not opposed to having it.
Understood.
So this might be something that's for some, but not for all contracts. Okay.
We have the authority outside of this contract to enter into the contract. The governing board has the authority to enter into the contract with the CMO if they wish.
So this would be one where it would be maybe not legally required, but expectation management, communications, sort of like internal expectations. So the three of us have no objections to it.
Okay. And this can happen probably at any time in life cycle of a charter school, correct? I mean, I'm assuming that maybe a charter school could start without entering into a contract with the management company and then decide maybe later on that they want to, a year or two down the line.
Or change it.
Yeah, or change it.
Did the team have any other recommended changes?
Oakmont was very responsive in working through the changes previously identified.
Do you want to, does Oakmont have any?
I have one question.
Okay.
With the performance framework, 8.2.1. Is the, in parentheses, if applicable, does that kind of cover any changes that we need to have in our guidance framework that's being proposed?
Yes. That's that,
If applicable, it covers that then.
yeah, if, because these are largely dependent on ESSA.
Right.
So if ESSA gets reauthorized, then there's the ability to modify.
Should it
Go ahead.
say
I'm sorry.
that? Well, I was going to say, should it reference that or is that not?
I think that's two or three contingencies away from now. And so I think this is suitable to its task. It gives some flexibility in case there's a change in the statewide performance framework. If there's a change in the statewide performance framework mandated by the legislature, of course, every charter school would have to come back and revise. So I think if applicable is suitable to its task here. And if applicable, it's a safety valve in case.
Two, they the assurances, and part of those assurances are that they will abide by the requirement.
I have a question. The relationship between Article 4 and Article 13. 4 is about term renewal and revocation, but all the termination stuff is back in 13, I think, instead of, would it make sense to have that all be in one place?
I think it might make sense for future.
Right, I'm
It might make sense.
thinking more big picture here, but
And I think that the way that this is it follows the flow of the statute. So the statute itself separates those two. The performance framework is between the initial contract and renewal and termination. So they're following, this applicant is following the flow of the statute and the regulations.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but was it 3 that's all in code, right? Renewal and revocation and all those things that they talked about earlier is all in code. Correct.
Yes, this is an instance where this successful applicant has used code language where they're not required to, but it's not forbidden that they restate statutory language verbatim.
It makes sense for a revocation to be in Article 13 instead of Article 4.
It would make sense, but it's not mission critical.
enough.
The two articles will be read together. Maybe for future dates, the sample will have, the flow will be more like the life cycle of a charter rather than the order in the statute.
Okay, just because revocation isn't referenced in Article 4, but it is in.
right, in the caption you're talking,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just removing revocation, sorry.
So
This is my
in
little-
4.3, I'm trying to read this like I'm sitting here as a member of the state board and there's an expedited renewal application presented. And we're to approve of that unless there's exceptional circumstances for the rejection of it, or it seeks material changes. I just wanted some help on what are exceptional circumstances that felt a little vague to me, and it doesn't, I don't know. I don't feel like I'd have much guidance in addressing that. You could have a reasonable dispute about if it's a big deal or not.
And I think that that's the way the statute is written, and this is statutory text, the way the statute is written is this is your call about what is exceptional in the facts of that particular expedited renewal.
So if we we determine that
Yeah.
at that time, that's sufficient.
Yes,
It's our decision.
it's your decision because you have to make a finding. I wouldn't want them to set out in the contract what your findings could be or what exceptional circumstances are. That's very case dependent, situation of the moment, facts of the moment. Their contract could not bound your discretion.
Right. Which would make us more conservative in our probably look at it.
And I think the language calls for a light footprint when it says exceptional circumstances. So if a disagreement with a reasonable choice that a charter renewal applicant would make sits to me different than something that sort of like shocks the conscience or takes one's breath away. So the term exceptional itself is
Can I ask why we even need expedited renewal? I mean, these are 5-year contracts, except that the charter school can give a 90-day notice back in 13 before the end of a school year and not have the contract last any longer. But the 4.3 is saying, well, if you're getting the highest ratings, you can come in and we'll renew you without a lot of fanfare.
In statute, that's how it's written in.
Right. So I'm understanding that, right?
Idea behind
Yes.
that.
Go ahead.
No,
it's statutory text. It doesn't need to be there. If it is, if somebody requests because they fall into the exceptional category in the attendance center rankings for 2 years in a row, we'll come in and discuss whether exceptional circumstances could exist, and then
It's only when they're up for renewal. So that's only after the 5-year, right? So when they're up for renewal, that, right? Okay.
Yeah, it's 256.
sub
That's
13.
the point. I find
So,
it interesting.
Is it only when they're up for renewal, or is it? any-
Okay.
If they're in the highest ratings for the prior 2 years, then they can seek a renewal. I guess not for more than 5 more. So you could do it for 2 years and then get 5 more years from the 2 years? Yes. Yeah. So it's not just at the end of the 5 year.
so if I make.
I'm not pushing
Right,
back.
between 2 years and then they can, okay.
So
So is this code language too?
this is code language. And again, we'd have to, going back to the discussion about template contracts, we'd have to have a discussion about how much code language and for what purpose is in the sample contract.
Because there are many instances here, especially in discrimination or whatever, that just incorporate by reference the law and, on that topic. In 5.3, are these charter schools generally applying for tax exempt status, like a 501c3s?
I don't know about the number, but they.
The one like,
Profit.
the main one that you can contribute to and get a tax deduction. Because there's some requirements of that, like conflict of interest policy, gift acceptance policy, sometimes nepotism. Do we see all that stuff? You get it?
We require them to be a nonprofit. I say nonprofit.
Yes, they're statutorily required to be established as a nonprofit entity.
Which is in Iowa's,
So they'd be
Yeah,
organized
and then-
under chapter 504. So
right?
Then-
With,
But that doesn't mean you're tax exempt. You got to do more than,
Mhm. As far as the policies go that you referenced, they are required to have those on their website and available for anybody's review at any time. Because of the heightened monitoring activities that we did a year and a half or so ago, we did end up reviewing a number of those policies. But in a typical review, I suppose I would leave that to you from a school improvement standpoint of how those are reviewed.
We could ask for policies at any time. That would be a public organization, public school.
and they need, in 5.7, they need to have a anti-nepotism policy, but do we define the degree to which people are related? Well, is that code or is that?
256E is,
It says hiring of family members. So it doesn't define the degree.
I mean, it could be
Family
spouse,
member.
child, but what if it's is that my family? I not even know them.
so that would be, and then that would be if there's a question. The contract meets the mandatory minimum of the statute. If the statute needs to provide more guidance about like fourth cousins.
I don't know. It's more of a question than,
And so I think that the policies that would apply under chapter 504 would have a more detailed grain size. They're subject to that anyway, so it's belts and suspenders.
Can we go back to 12.2, the management contract? Do we, if they and when they do enter into the management contract, do we see that as well?
You could, but you're not required to. The state board sort of reviews the performance framework, reviews the data. If there's a question of like, we want to dig into more information, it's always subject to your inspection, but it's not necessarily subject to your approval, because once they have an approved contract and an approved application, they have the authority to enter into their own contracts.
I think what I'm thinking through, and this isn't Oakmont specific necessarily, but thinking through having a management services provider, are there specifics that we should require providers to have in place for liabilities? The liabilities are in place in the contract to protect the school, but what protects the school in the event that there's a provider that has issues, for example? And the school is entrusting the provider to provide good services, but that may not always be the case. And not having a template of what those provider contracts could potentially look like. Do we have an obligation to make sure that there are some of those fail safes, the contracts? And I don't know what drives aside from the management provider being defined in this space, how it drives back to the rest of the contract, other than the management provider is going to be responsible for all of the deliverables in this contract. And we're not going to know that this is being met.
So you would know indirectly through reporting about fiscal solvency, through reporting about achievement, through any state complaints that might have been surfaced concerning picking on Oakmont only because they're in front of me. If there are concerns that relate back to, or there's a common root cause, I don't know, just looking back at the statute, I don't know if we have they've got flexibility in buyer beware.
Yeah. No, I'm just thinking about all of our other systems of how we certify and how we work with all of our other systems, and making sure that providers are certified and how we look at all of our other programs? And should we have the same fail safes in place for the charter schools?
There are fail safes question by question, and some of the fail safes are like but all of them ultimately reside with the charter's governing organization, not the EMO. The charter, not the EMO, is ultimately responsible for performance. There are certain things where there are non-negotiables with the EMO, that if you're employing teachers and providing teachers, they have to be Iowa licensed and certified to the age and content that they're teaching. But I think in this case, I would hesitate, absent specific statutory authority, to require beyond what the statute requires concerning EMOs. The only reference in EMOs is the charter school picks and contracts. And then the charter school is ultimately responsible for the performance of their agents, the performance of those the EMO that they pick. So I understand the inclination. I'm just struggling to see how you all have the authority to act on that inclination other than what's already there. The performance framework, which includes fiscal and administrative responsibility. That's an indirect way of ensuring that the EMO fulfills their contract with the charter.
And you're also getting an annual report that comes before the board.
In Article 10, maybe this is for Sandra.
Probably is.
GAP, I know what GAP is, but what are other generally accepted standards of fiscal management? I mean, are we talking about they could do cash basis? They could do modified accrual? What are we? Is there a standard for the reports you want to see? Because there's all kinds of bases upon which you could do your financials.
Yeah, so we know how good question. We know how they have to report it to us. Where I'm not familiar is how they may have to report anything for the nonprofit side of the business. So I can talk about how they would have to do it for us, but that may reference, and I defer to Oakmont if they want to jump in on what else they might be referencing there.
So, yeah, Dr. Klein's correct. They must report as any other public school would on the chart of accounts using the same accounting and the same fiscal controls that a public school district would. But they may, like she's correct, they may have other purposes, other audiences. Their philanthropy donors, the IRS, the Secretary of State. There might be other accepted accounting principles or laws.
Yeah, 10.8 seems to be saying they got to submit their annual report. And it says in compliance with chapter 19, I guess. But there's a budget and cash flow report that comes July 1, I guess. They're different times, or you wouldn't have your budget or your audit at the last day of the year. That would probably take 4 months, right?
Yeah, so we only require, so their budgeting process is different than public schools. So public schools go through a multi-month process because it ends up with a local tax implication, right? The charter schools don't have authority to levy taxes. They don't have any levying authority. So their budget is just approved by their board and then available. So that we're pretty silent on what it requires other than posting to the website 10 days after it's approved. So that could be done, that the timing for that could be a little bit different. We only see reports from school districts once a year, and that's by the 15th of September every year. And then we see the audits after that, usually within 3 to 6 months after that, we'll see their audits. And that's the only reporting overall that we see from school districts and AEAs.
Is your ability to oversight ability allow you to say, I'd like to see a interim financial?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then one last question, I promise.
This is your contract.
The insurance schedule, is that prescribed somewhere? I mean, like lots of times when you deal with a municipality and you have a contract, they say, here, here's the insurance you must get. We don't, because we have the indemnity provision there, I guess I want to be sure that
We just,
there's insurance for what we're being indemnified for.
we require that they have insurance, and jump in here if I'm wrong, that's really the requirement, that they have insurance coverage.
We don't have,
Yes, go ahead.
But we don't say what coverage we want
correct, have a suggestion first.
or a requirement. Nowhere we do. I mean,
Secure appropriate insurance.
So it's, I think of the coverage limit for 11.14 for data breach insurance, if the coverage limit was 50,000, I think maybe be like,
yeah,
So I trust the subject matter experts and the finance experts about whether or not these seem sort of within the goalposts. Are they good estimates of potential risk? And I think there's, as far as this contract, there's nothing where the statute requires appropriate. There's nothing that jumps off this page as inappropriate.
I would agree with that statement, but I would say as far as determining whether or not it's reasonable, I would defer to Oakmont, their legal counsel and their business operations people to determine if these numbers are adequate to cover the operations that they expect.
and there's no kind of umbrella coverage over all of it for us here. Maybe I'm missing it. You know how you have, well, different types of coverage and different policy limits, but then there's maybe an overarching X, and it's not as expensive, but you know, I mean, in my world, when I have this, you client need to talk to the insurance agent or your insurance agent to make sure what they're producing to you is A, consistent with what's being proposed, and B, is sufficient. I mean, so we would rely on an expert to tell us that's sufficient or not. And I think we're being asked to say, well, that's enough. I'm not sure it is. I'm not sure it isn't either. I'm not,
Mhm.
I think we should, is there a resource that we have to,
So
being in-house, I'm talking.
I read every contract that comes before the board and that comes before the department. And I have a general sense of contracts that I've read that have coverage limits, coverage max, coverage minimums. There's no policy labeled as such an umbrella policy, except in the work comp, employer liability, the very last clause. But these seem within the goalposts, within the contracts that I've read that the Department of Education has entered into as far as liability. I'm no insurance expert. I didn't take Alan Whitus's class, but
I did.
I've seen enough contracts that nothing about these coverage limits, minimums or maximums gave me any pause.
Okay.
Okay, just a brief summary, and we'll hear from Oakmont. We're recommending a couple of changes in 10.5 with the cadence signage to cut that short, and then 12.2, that's with the management contract, it's going to change from the may provide rather than will provide. Those are the two changes that we're requesting.
Yes.
Okay. So we have some representatives from Oakmont here.
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Do you want them to come to the table?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Chris.
Okay, great.
Go ahead.
Hi, this is Chris Scalisi Earl. I'm Vice President, Oakmont Education. I just want to say we've really, Janet and her team have been extremely helpful to us with some unfamiliar timelines that we haven't had to approach before. So we really appreciate the assistance they've given us. And I just wanted to let the board know that we actually crowdsourced with a colleague who already had been approved in Iowa using their template with Horizon Science Academy. So Chris Murphy is a friend, and we figured we shouldn't use one of our Ohio ones. So we worked on that using that template that had been approved last year by the board. So we apologize for any kind of misunderstanding in that 10.2. That was, we don't charge fees. We don't charge our students anything. So we appreciate the clarifications, and we look forward to sign the lease this week. So we're really looking forward to getting it all up and running. So again, I just want to say thank you to Janet and her team. Have been really helpful in navigating things when we had questions. They've been responsive. And I just want to say thanks for our executive director, Chris, for being there today. And I appreciate you all. And if you have questions, we're pretty accessible and readily available. And I know some of our team is already going to be out there next week.
Thank you.
Can I ask one non-contract related question? Do you know what CTE, the areas that you're going to pursue initially?
I'm going to toss that over to Dr. Farley really quick.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. We're going to be doing construction, advanced manufacturing, healthcare, child development associate for childcare, and then paraeducator. Those will be the first 5 that we do. And I do also want to add that we will be using a sector strategy approach. So we've already started to talk with business partners locally about their ability to guide our instruction so that it really does provide entry-level employees that meet their expectations. And we're working with DMAC to make sure that the national credentials we use will be crosswalked with the regional ones that they use. So our students will be getting both regional and national industry credentials. And there's a huge part of our program that includes that work-based learning out in the community, because you can't learn how to swim by standing on the side of a pool. So very excited to get started. And we think that those 5 really meet the local and regional needs of the community for entry-level workers.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
President Robbins, may I ask them a question just to clarify the record? Representatives of Oakmont, do you have any objections to the changes that Dr. Klein and myself and Ms. Boyd and the board have proposed?
No, sir, we do not.
Just want to make the record, just wanted to make it abundantly clear.
We do not.
I will take a motion.
So moved.
Second. Moved in second to approve the contract with Greater Oaks, parentheses, Oakmont Charter. Any further discussion?
With the modification.
With the modifications, yes. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And for the lag. Those opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. Okay, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. We're excited. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Look forward to hearing back from y'all.
That's going to be amazing.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you soon.
All righty. All right, let's move to empowering charter school contract.
And my name is Janet Boyd, school improvement consultant. And we have today from Empowering, I'm on Zoom, Sarah Swayze. You folks remember Sarah, and then Joseph Nguyen. And Joe, are you the board president? Are you?
I'm a board vice president and chair.
And I see Sarah's on too. So those are the folks representing Empowering. We've this is kind of the same drill. We have the summary. We are recommending that the state board approve and eventually sign the contract with Empowering. We've included the contract here as the attachment. We also have we do have some items that we believe need to be tweaked. And then, of course, we'll listen to what the board has thoughts on that too. So when you're ready for us to.
Yep. Tell us about your tweaks.
Which one is go first? Okay.
So, empowering excellence, or if we're gonna start on section 4. And that is the educational program. And there's some format wonkiness about like how lists are formatted, and that can be cleaned up later. It's it's a formatting issue that can be corrected later. I've got no objections to that, but free appropriate public education, it is on page 7 of the board packet, page 5 of the contract. The last bullet, right above school performance standards.
Yes.
The charter schools agrees that it is the AEA. And I think this is an artifact of Iowa's system. My opinion is the entire bullet is unnecessary.
I'm sorry, what's the title of the bullet?
Title, there's no title on the bullet, so it's the,
For section 5.
Oh.
Right, it's the last thing up for.
Okay, thanks. Right
So
before. Yep.
is that an accurate bullet?
it's, the first sentence is inaccurate because the AEAs will still, in the status quo, the AEAs are still providing services to LEAs, this empowering excellence, a public school district, any other charter school within their AEA. The AEAs currently provide services to the 2 legacy charters and the 3 charters authorized under the current law. So the first sentence is there are services that the AEA will be providing that empowering excellence does not have to provide under the current law. And then the indemnification clause is sort of unnecessary. It's covered by state law. The State Board of Education is only involved if we're named as a party, and then
But first sentence, maybe I'm misreading something, but it states that it's the AEA is responsible for all costs providing services. That's not.
so. No, I think this is a find and replace artifact by the way that Iowa has divided the authority to provide special education services. The bullet itself is inaccurate because
It's not the AA's total responsibility. The schools have.
it's split responsibility in the current system between school districts and AEAs. Correct. And that's why I recommend the entire bullet be removed. Not, it's unnecessary. It might be necessary in other states where there's only one level of special education provider. I recommend the entire bullet be removed.
How does,
It addressed somewhere else?
do the representatives from Empowering understand that?
Like is the board's preference to do this item by item or have the department staff complete its comments and then?
Well, I mean, this is a big cost if they're not on board with it.
So representatives of Empowering Excellence, you would be responsible under the current law for providing special education instructional services, for hiring a special education teacher, for ensuring that special education teacher implements IEPs. But you would be responsible in partnership with Grantwood AEA to do child find, to do evaluations, And Grantwood AEA would be providing you with your speech language pathologist, with your school social worker, with your occupational therapist. So under the current law, you would not be required to assume those costs because under state law, under Iowa state law, those would remain the responsibility of Grantwood AEA. So if you have a student with an IEP who requires speech language services or occupational therapy, Grantwood AEA would provide that. You would not need to provide that because another entity is required by law to do so. So that's why the department is recommending that bullet be removed, because you're assuming that bullet assumes for you more costs than would be required under current Iowa law.
Okay, add on clarification. If I may add a clarification, everything Mr. May said is correct in that you are responsible for incurring the cost for all of the special education services, employing the teacher, providing anything else pursuant to the IEP. However, as a charter school, you are not ultimately responsible for those costs. All actual individualized costs can be billed back to the district of residence for each of those students. That billing is done twice a year, once in February and once in July. So the fiscal impact to the charter school is that it must pay up front, and then it waits about 6 months or so in order to recoup those costs.
My question on that was, this says the charter school agrees that it is the AEA.
And I think that is an artifact, that it's not.
As opposed to
that
it is them that's responsible. It's saying we are the AEA. I mean, and then they are responsible.
In every other state, the school district would be responsible for providing the school psychologist, the occupational therapist, the school social worker, the professionals that the AEA provides in Iowa. So I think that this is an artifact of sample contract language from other states that don't fit Iowa's system. So if this were across the river in Illinois, they're agreeing they're an Illinois district, and that as an Illinois district, they would be responsible for providing all of the services that the AEA provides in Iowa, the evaluation, speech language, occupational therapy. Rachel, correct me if I miss anything. But I think it's an artifact of the template language not fitting Iowa's current governance model.
As long as the charter school understands it's a shared cost. I wondered if the last sentence of that bullet point, though, should be added to section 17F, the general indemnity language. Or does 17F cover it, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's the 17F is global, which is why the entire section.
Okay.
The entire section's first sentence inaccurate under Iowa law, assumes burdens that they're not required to assume. Second sentence is superfluous.
Covered by F.
Yep.
So your recommendation is to strike the entire bullet?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
The second recommendation is section 9. It deals primarily with funding, and since I don't have my seal of biliteracy in English and school finance, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Klein to use the right words.
Thank you, Mr. Mays. Under the first bullet, I see that the first sentence of the first bullet is accurate and the last sentence of the first bullet is accurate, but I would propose that everything in between be stricken.
So section 9.
I'm sorry.
Did everybody find section 9? Okay. Okay.
So it's on page 15 of the PDF version, I think page 13 of the contract.
Can we get page numbers?
Yeah,
on
we
these?
don't have page numbers, FYI, but
So there's no page numbers on the printed.
I
I think
got
they're
it.
saying that and that.
So Okay, keep the first sentence and the last. Okay.
Strike in between.
Okay.
Strike in between.
So if a student is an eligible pupil, stay,
After.
but everything after the first sentence and before that is out.
Yes.
A student.
And the origin story for the inaccurate text, that's how the statute used to read prior to amendment.
You got that?
That would be the first part. And then also on the same page, the third bullet, I would also recommend that that entire bullet also be removed.
Starting with 4H.
Yeah, for each
Third one?
enrolled in the charter school. Yes, the third bullet.
And is the second bullet point following up on the conversation we had before?
Yes, and it's also direct from statute also.
Yeah.
Yep, it's
But that was in conflict with what we just struck.
exactly.
Should we remove it?
And so the final need to do is something that can be resolved in the execution of the contract, but charter school contact information, and then the State Board of Education, this is the second to last, third to last page of the document. The charter school needs a mailing address, street address. The State Board of Education, that address as listed is the Iowa Board of Educational Examiners. So when the contract is executed, our recommendation is to provide addresses for both. And then section 5, dealing with the annual report. This is an issue that it is the 8th page of the PDF. So the annual performance evaluation. The recommendation is to strike it because it's
That's not exactly, that annual performance evaluation is not due June 30th. It's also in code and rule when the reports are due. The annual report to legislators, that needs to come to us October 1 annually. And then it comes to you for approval. So the information there is right because it has a wrong date on it.
and what date would you propose adding if it needs to be in the contract?
The information needs to be to us October 1. It's in code.
And all the labeling, the AAA, that's all, you guys are fixing that?
Yes.
We don't have to point all those out, okay.
Yeah, it's,
If you leave it in there.
I'm ignoring typos that I saw.
For October. You need to,
Right.
sure.
need it like 30 if you're just changing the date or taking it out, Thomas, because if you're.
Before the 5th 5A.
Together in code.
Performance upward.
So we've had a sidebar discussion over here about the best way to fix the June 30th date. And this is one where it would be easier just to strike it because the entire content is in the code, is in statute. So rather than trying to sort of like pull threads and see what happens when you pull a thread, it would be easier for revising purposes. And again, I've got no objections to restating in statute. For revising purposes, for today's task, it would be easier rather than a comprehensive rewrite, just to strike the entire paragraph beginning performance evaluation, strike and reserve because the concepts and requirements are completely in code. So I'd
we're a little bit worried about the spillover effect. If we make an edit, does it trigger another edit that needs to be made? It would be easier to just strike the entire matter.
Instead of just leaving it as the charter school should be subject to an evaluation by SB according to.
Because it's according to 256E12 and the academic organization
Yeah.
financial, those are your metrics.
They're all in code and roll.
Gotcha.
So those are our recommendations for your consideration, as well as empowering excellence as consideration.
So was it? If I recall, this is the first one I saw that said nutrition services and stuff like that. Is that? You know, like
They're not, and I'm not,
section 13.
yeah, I'm gonna let Cassandra, because that's been more her.
Okay, they're not required to provide a nutrition program, but if they do provide a nutrition program, they may make that.
I just don't remember if it was in their application. It's like this, if they said it in the application, they will. I just don't.
I don't
think
it
anybody
was,
promised
yeah.
that they would. And part of that, I think, can be timing as far as getting a provider, getting somebody set up to add it. And
Okay,
this way, you can.
so we should leave it. Leave it. Should we add it to the first?
Sarah,
Said we were, okay?
Sarah, I think you're off mute.
I'm sorry.
I know that they're in conversations, working to establish one. I don't know if they're going to be successful for the fall or not. She can probably give you an update on that. My information is a few weeks old.
Just kind of clarification, we send out a letter, right? Very soon after this portion of the process is done. It's kind of a to-do list, and I don't know if that's the best characterization, but it has things like, contacts with our food and nutrition folks and those kinds of things, finance information, reporting requirements, all those items are addressed in this kind of to-do letter. Next steps.
Section 9, the very last bullet. Says if necessary and pursuant to the rules adopted by the state board. The first school year of the new charter should be based on enrollment estimates for the charter. Is that?
On section 5, correct?
9.
9, I'm
The last bullet point of 9.
Yes, that is what we do. So each August, each charter school, whether they're a new charter school or a returning charter school, they send in through our student reporting system, they send in enrollment estimate. So whoever they already have signed up at that time. And that's how I generate that's the calculation I use to identify the amount of the payments for the first 2 payments, September and October. And then in October, we'll use the certified enrollment count, and I'll start my reconciliation process. And then in January, we'll use the winter SRI student account, and then that'll pay them through May. And then in June, we do a final reconciliation before they receive their June final payment. So yes.
And that's in the first year, that's just the first year.
That's every year.
This says for the first year.
Yeah.
Strike for the first year.
So the statute requires you, which you've already done, to adopt rules for determining estimated enrollments after the first school year. So the process that Dr. Klein mentioned is shelf stable. It applies to the first year and then it's sort of an artifact of statutory amendments. But the process by statute, you've adopted a rule which provides funding for the first and the second year, the metric is the same. So this bullet point's compliant with the statute and the rules regarding first year. It just so happens that the same model applies to years after the first year.
Okay.
But it's always estimates, isn't it? I mean, we never know what enrollment will be
Well,
until after they show up,
they
right?
get paid in the year they're serving the student.
Right.
And so we do that the first count is an estimate in August, but it actually is the kids that have signed up. So yes, we don't know if they've shown up yet,
Okay,
but they did
so it is
sign up.
actual.
And then, yep, and then in October, that's based on actual
You
certified.
reconcile to
enrollment.
actual.
Yep.
My thought was we need that bullet point, but it sounds like maybe you do. Because it was incorporating the statute.
Right. It's
So is this bullet point in the previous application we approved?
So,
And I'm not gonna go back and say, but this is
no, but this is
kind
the
of the
kind of thing.
template
Yeah.
where it's.
so, and I think every one of these contracts, you're going to find something that maybe this would be addressed by the future template. And I think let's just note it. And
Yeah, I get it.
Asking for, just asking, just a point of reference.
And I think that we're gathering notes on, gosh, this didn't seem to work right well here, or there's a better way that, there is some language in here that Empowering uses that's fairly good and succinct and might be something that we would incorporate in the model. I think you'll find pluses and minuses to every one of these contracts.
And the issue that I have is that once we approve this and they become a model for others to use, well, you approved it in February 2024.
Yep.
Not approving it.
Well, we approved it in February 2024, but we've got this sample now. The sample, we learned through experience. We now know more than we, the department, you, the state board, the applicants know what hasn't worked. They would have the benefit of these deliberations, the meeting minutes of why you might have approved the contract with some reservation or with suggestions for improvement. So I think I'm always concerned about precedential effects of an action, but there's enough, each contract needs to be bargained under its own terms based on what you and the applicant know at the time you're bargaining.
Okay, other questions from board members? Or did you have other items?
That was it for our non-negotiables.
Okay.
Is the insurance the same as the last time? I mean, it's not in the same order and the words are a little different and they got an umbrella in this one, wasn't in the last one. Yeah.
Liability's the same.
And again, this is very context specific because they're serving a smaller grade span.
Like this one has property casualty, the other one, well, I guess the other one did too.
And I think property as required by the landlord or lender,
Right.
that's sufficient to its task since they're, I'd let them speak to that. But again, there are things that the last applicant had, coverages that the last applicant had that maybe we'd want to encourage Empowering to think about, such as the one that,
It got about the same. It's very similar.
Does SBE have a policy on insurance certificates? I mean, it says we do. I just don't remember seeing it.
it would be covered by,
State law, right?
yeah, it would,
I mean, to give it's 17B is what I'm talking about. Do we need the and SBE policy thing there? That was in the other one too. I forgot to ask it when I was being boring.
so pursuant to state law,
Is that enough?
state law is enough, but I'd also wouldn't want to step on the Bureau of Accounting's toes in case the Bureau of Accounting hits some internal operating procedures regarding forms of insurance coverage. So I would prefer to leave that just in case they've got issues
That's fine.
that I don't know about.
Other questions?
Thomas, could you just briefly summarize again the recommended changes? So the removal of the bullet in section 4, the removal of the bullet in section 5, modification of the bullet in section 9, and then
So,
The address.
the address.
so the recommendation, section 4, last paragraph, last bullet point, beginning, the charter school agrees that it is the AEA, striking the entire bullet. Section 5, right above the bolded performance framework, striking the entire paragraph beginning annual performance evaluation. Section 9, funding of charter school. Strike first bullet point. Keep the first and the last sentence. Strike the middle, strike any content that's not either the first sentence beginning with the charter school shall receive. And then maintain if a student is an eligible pupil under section 261E, strike everything between those two sentences. And then the third bullet point is inaccurate because it recites prior statutory text that's been amended since, and strike that third bullet point in section 9. And then the corrected addresses in the signature blocks. So those are staff recommendations.
One clarification back to section 13, the charter school nutrition services. Is that the charter school will provide school nutrition, or is that the charter school may provide school nutrition?
And I'm going to, maybe this is a time that the leaders from Empowering would choose to, I think that they would be best equipped to address what their plans are, and what their plans are might inform whether this is a will or a may.
I think that I would say the charter school may provide nutritional meals.
Oh,
So I can change that to the charter school may provide. Joe, are you in agreement?
Yes.
So I think I might be anticipating a question from Board Member Kane. So if it's an option, is it necessary to spell it out? Because you always have the power to. If it's something that's discretionary in the contract, is it necessary? So it might be necessary for your purposes internally at Empowering, but did I correctly anticipate your question?
yes, you did.
So if we're changing that, then the additional recommendation is just to strike it completely with the other recommendations, if I'm understanding this correctly.
So if your intent is to make providing nutritional services discretionary, then it doesn't need to be in the contract.
Except if they said they were going to do it in the application we approved.
And did you mention?
Then it should be shall.
Yeah. So refresh our
What's in the application, so.
So refresh our recollection and the board's staff recollection and the board's recollection on the application itself. Did the application itself refer to nutrition services?
I don't think we put in there that we were going to provide lunch for the kids because they're only here for a short period of time.
And let's diggy the whole thing.
So a recommendation from the Board Member Kane is to strike the entire paragraph as unnecessary. It wasn't addressed in the application because of your delivery model. So the recommendation from staff and board is to,
Can we make it, hold on a second.
Yeah, in the application, it states food services, EECS will provide free and reduced cost meals for kids who are unable to afford the full meal, full price of a meal.
then it's shall and it's, then it's shall and it's,
Yeah.
then
And it
it's
should
will and
stay.
it stays. So
Yeah.
thanks for
Yeah.
the,
Yeah.
then it stays as is. or-
Yep.
Yep.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
I'm on the part about the financial, about the insurance. Is there anywhere to find how much insurance is required by the state of Iowa? Because I researched it and I could not find exact numbers or anything close to it.
So thank you for the question. I think the amount of insurance is flexible based on the amount of risk. So if you are a small charter operator, that looks different than if you were a multi-building charter operator. The risks are going to be different. Some risks will be smaller, some will be larger. And I think there's no mandatory minimums. The mandatory minimums are whatever is bargained in the contract, and staff, myself and others' assessment of the coverage limits that your team put into the contract is that they are suitable to the task. They match the risks that are inherent in your delivery model.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
No, that's it.
Dr. Klein wishes to correct or add.
I just want to add, I agree with everything that Mr. May said. Sir, I would just also add that if you guys elect to change any of your operational models, that might be an opportunity to revisit adequate insurance coverage. I know when we spoke a couple weeks ago, we had discussed the potential for adding transportation. So transporting students versus only educating them in one setting would be an example of where a different level of insurance coverage would be needed.
Okay.
The other thing,
Thank you.
Sarah, I know that you are considering another facility. And so when you do decide, you'll want to let us know. And maybe you're far enough along that you can use that. You do need to have an address for the contract. So.
So
Okay.
a follow-up question with regards to that. So if we do not know if we are changing buildings by the time we sign the contract, we just need to let you know in writing. I'm assuming that we will be actually in a different building.
I'm going to defer to you. They right now, they have a location. They're looking for, what they're looking for, I'll give a little background for you. I don't mean to speak for you, but they're looking for a location that's more conducive to their students. They want to be able to serve kids when they need to be served, which might be evenings. And currently they're in a credit union. It's a credit union, correct? They're in a credit union and they close their doors at 5. So sometimes kids need services later than that. So they're looking at a facility that would be more conducive to their population.
So I think the point about the address that we had surfaced earlier in section 18 is not where your location is where's your business office? Where can the state send notice?
Okay.
And so if you have section 7, second bullet point, location, the primary location shall be consistent with this application. If it is a location where you can deploy your delivery model, where you can serve your target population, that's sufficient under this application. We don't need to the data people will need to know your street your street location for the data table, but it's not necessary to be in here right now. The address that we need is where can the state board send you notices and where can you send the state board notices? So that's the purpose of adding the address, which may or may not be your physical location. It may be some other where instruction's occurring. It may be some other address or some other office, but the physical location where the instruction is occurring doesn't need to be specified in the contract so long as it's consistent with your application.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the clarification and your time.
Other questions or anything else from the representatives from Empowering?
No, I have none.
No, thank you.
And just for my purposes, do you agree to the changes to the contract that the state board and the department are proposing?
Yes. Joe, do you agree?
Yes, I do agree. I'm sorry. I'm balancing a couple of things right now, so I apologize for the delay.
Okay, so section 4, the last bullet we're striking. Section 5, there's a bullet on your performance that we're striking. Section 9, there's a modification of the first bullet and a striking of the third bullet. Section 13, nutrition services is changing to shall, and then the additional information on address. That's what I have for notes.
With those changes, I move approval.
Again,
By Brian and second by Cindy. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. Let's take a 10-minute break.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Get my power cord.
right?
Oh, baby. So the next considerations are the two Civica contracts. The first one we're looking at is Civica Cedar Rapids. And we should have Carlos Alvarez, Asiala Carbolosa, and Adriana Lima. And if I hope I did not mispronounce. Is that Adriana? I believe they're trying to work on promoting the other folks that were going to be present. But we're going to go ahead and begin. And we'll get them added as they come online.
That's correct. I'll keep trying. There we go. I
Okay.
think
Great.
Carlos was there. There we
There we
go.
go. Here we
He's
go,
jumping on.
Carly. So again, this is Civica Cedar Rapids. We are recommending that the board sign the contract with Civica Cedar Rapids. We do have some things that we'd like to see modified in the contract. So we'll start with our suggestions. Our first section is
So there's, the first recommendation is in the manner of cleanup. There are some references since it's the same organization that's leading both in Cedar Rapids and Des Moines. In Cedar Rapids' contract, there are some stray references to Des Moines, which we would hope that they would agree we can clean up. And then the second, the substantive change is similar to the discussion on fees that we had with Oakmont. And it's the very same text. It's almost, I think it's the same source text. Tuition and fees, there's some questionable language. Back to the earlier discussion about fees for field trips, fees for activities, Iowa law and pay to play. When is a fee chargeable? When is a fee waivable? And so the suggestion that the department is going to make to the board and to Civica Cedar Rapids, this will be the same, I think it's going to be the same comment on Civica Des Moines, is to, in section 9.5, page 32 of the PDF, keep the first sentence, amend the second sentence ending after a reasonable fee per student, period. Then strike the remainder of the paragraph as potentially having an inconsistent application with Iowa school finance law and the requirement that charter school attendance be tuition free.
Hi, this is Adri. If you can, I'm sorry to interrupt. If you don't mind just repeating once again where we begin the strike.
So the recommendation to the two parties to the contract, to your team and the state board, is keep the first sentence, amend the second sentence, put a period after charge a reasonable fee per student, period, and then strike the remainder of the paragraph. Because there's questions about sometimes there are allowable fees for instructional materials, sometimes there's not. Sometimes there's allowable fees for extracurriculars depending on the nature, sometimes there's not. And that's sort of unique to Iowa law, and it's part of our definition of what tuition is. So if it's an allowable fee under Iowa law, it would still be allowable for you to charge that. This just removes any ambiguity between your proposed contract language and state law. Dr. Klein can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the nature of the department staff's proposal. And that's the only substantive proposal that staff have.
Great, thank you.
Questions from the board?
I just noticed there's a little more insurance on this one. Transportation. Maybe a couple of other areas. Wasn't less. Except that, the D and O insurance is 50,000. The other ones, I guess, that was 1 million. The second, 10.1.2, am I misreading?
I think you're correct, but I think the prior applicant might have overinsured. But that's their right. To me, this doesn't seem based on errors in emission, directors and officers insurance. Based on the risk in Iowa courts, that doesn't seem to be a low number.
Yeah, the statute 0.101 or something says they're not liable. This is more funding defense.
Right.
I think, yeah. Was Cassandra okay with the financial thing? This one reminded me of, was it Hanover again? Like Oakmont, Hanover was patterned after that. Might be a good start for it. Or Horizon, sorry,
Horizon,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah,
The
Horizon.
Oakmont, so they mull theirs off of.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
There's some common contract language amongst a lot of contracts that you have seen before and will see before. It reminds me of the Book of Mark. Book of Mark is completely included in both Matthew and Luke. So there's some common source text that once we identify an improvement to that source text, we can just apply it to future contracts with the same language.
And so just to clarify, this is opening in 25, not. According to.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
I correct, assuming that they don't have to spell out their performance targets specifically.
We did one, we had asked for specific metrics, to that.
So on
Should have said.
so it's section 722, their annual performance targets. Is that what you were referencing?
Right.
It looks a little bit different because it's percentages rather than cut score. I mean, they raise their targets in a little bit of a different way, as is their right, but they're objective and they're measurable.
I would be curious as how those targets are determined, how you came to those metrics.
And staff is going to defer to the profession, to the leaders from Civica Cedar Rapids for how the performance targets were selected.
Good morning, everyone. In order to determine those targets, we reviewed the performance data from schools within the district that we are planning on opening the school in. And based on that, we created the conservative goals after reviewing state data and local district data.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay. I have a question about section 12, particularly 12.1 says the state board, meaning us, can take corrective action or impose sanctions other than revocation in response to deficiencies in the school's performance or compliance with law. But then it goes on to talk about revocation in 12.2 and 12.3 and 12.4. Do you find that
I think, is it
inconsistent?
a code? Thought it was.
I mean,
because
we can't revoke and yet we.
You can revoke.
I mean, 12.1 says we can't. That's my only comment. And then it goes on to say, we can. Or here's how.
If the way that I'm reading this is not necessarily 12.1 saying that you cannot, it's just that there may be other actions like a corrective action plan that could be implemented aside from or instead of revocation.
So that's how I read it as well, that it was just sort of setting forth graduated sanctions. Revocation, of course, is a higher, it's the nuclear option. And 12.2, 3, and 4 set forth what, exercising that nuclear option would look like. But 12.1, to me, other than revocation, it's
That's,
graduated sanctions based on.
it's out of, that's the way it's stated in code. It says, the state board may take appropriate corrective actions or impose sanctions other than revocation in response to deficiencies in charter schools' performance or compliance.
It sort of depends on what the opposition is modifying, right? But it seems to me that it's saying the corrective actions and sanctions do not include revocation. Like, you cannot do that. Then it goes on to say how you can. I'm just.
Well, to me, I've read it as if you're going to revoke, here's some addition. And Ms. Boyd's correct, this is entirely from statute and goes back to the preliminary discussions about what belongs in contract. But to me, I've read this as I read the statute. Plenary power to do everything up to revocation. If revocation or non-renewal is being considered, here are some additional steps or here are some additional considerations. So I have no objections to this.
Okay.
I think it depends on the violation. I think,
No, I get that part. I just thought it was inconsistent, but I guess I'm the only one reading it differently than you.
Usually that's my job, to be the only one that did something different. Welcome to the club.
Might be clear to say like prior to revocation, the state board may take other, like placing them in default and then maybe laying out what that looks like and providing.
Yeah, like other than revocation as provided below, comma, the state board may take appropriate corrective action. I think that's what you're saying it means to me.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm reading it that other than revocation is excluding revocation from corrective actions.
So maybe can we, to make it less ambiguous, since obviously there's different, could we just say prior to revocation or whatever? There are other paths that the state board might take just to clarify it? Or
We could, it's statutory language. There's always, they do, it's a drag and drop from 256E. I think that might be something that I would propose considering in a sample contract to sort of clarify other than prior to. We could do that if it's the sense of the board that you could do that because your contract, my opinion is it's not. It might be advisable, not necessary in this instance.
Brian?
We've made a record. I'm fine.
Okay.
This is what happens when you read these late at night.
I do my best, Reed.
Any other questions from the board?
There's a 13.5 that's just missed. I'm not pointing out a typo. I wonder if is there some substance there or is it just?
That may
This
have
number.
been just an error in a tab.
Okay,
And so
all
we
right,
can edit
that's
that.
fine. I'm not trying to,
we might have asked them to
Typos.
remove something and the numbers.
that's fine.
All the way.
That's fine.
And I'm assuming that the Article 14 that has all 13s will be, all of that will be
Yeah,
formatted or,
Yes,
okay,
we understand the numberings off the.
yeah,
letterings.
fine.
it's really Article 13.
Yeah, formatting is never my strong suit.
We have a quote at.
Yeah.
Any other questions? So just to summarize, excuse me. We have some stray references. Excuse me, from Cedar Rapids and Des Moines to clear up. Excuse me, and section 9.5 tuition fees to modify. Those were the changes that I had.
I think actually every place that it refers to Des Moines should be Cedar Rapids. I think this contract, the contracts, because they're, look at schools, just different locations. When we read the contract, we read one version. And so I think that's where this is coming. We have the Des Moines contract for both locations, and we just need to get in there and make sure everything says Cedar Rapids on this
Sure.
contract.
They
Okay,
agree with.
So just gonna do for this contract what I did for the prior two contracts, just to make it clear. Civica Cedar Rapids, do you agree to the revisions of the contract as proposed by staff and the state board? Specifically regarding references, correcting references to Des Moines wherever they occur, and altering 9.5, the provision on fees, to make it sync up better with Iowa law.
Yeah, we do.
Thank you.
okay. Any comments from Civica?
Move we approve.
Thank you for the opportunity. We look forward to serving the students in the great state of Iowa, and specifically in these two communities that we'll be diving into. So once again, thank you for the opportunity. We're bringing a great model to both those communities.
Okay, this first one is for Cedar Rapids specifically.
Yes.
So I would take a motion for Cedar Rapids Civic.
So moved
It's been moved by Cindy,
With
with the proposed changes.
I'll second that.
second by Brian. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, Civica Des Moines.
So moved.
Well, it's
I thought the contracts were the same with just the,
they're the same, and so, but each
Well, except
contract has to be executed independently and voted on independently. So I think you anticipated my thought that I was going to recommend the same change to 9.5.
Don't need to make the other change for,
Because I did not find any references to Cedar Rapids in this
okay,
contract.
that's one change for this.
Just correct.
so I was going to so move with the changes.
Okay, so with the change, okay.
Second.
Moved by Cass, second by Brooke. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those indicate, say aye if you favor the motion.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. Okay, Civica and Des Moines and Cedar Rapids are approved.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
moving on to Quest Cedar Rapids charter school contract.
We're gonna have the same situation with Quest that we've had with Civic, and that they have two contracts, one for Cedar Rapids location, one for Des Moines location. And this one that you have before you is specific to Des Moines. But you're considering Cedar Rapids, so this contract is gonna have to have a strike and replace on the location. That makes sense. And did I jump ahead of myself? A little bit.
Well, the contract is Des Moines, right?
But I think that we're considering
Oh, on the agenda you're talking about.
on the agenda, it says Cedar Rapids on the agenda.
I guess that's first. You're right. That's number 8.
These two contracts that we have, the way we work with the contracts for these management organizations is that when they had 2 locations, we went through these contracts the best of our ability. And we only used one version. Am I making sense? So that when we did all the recommended changes, we used the one version. We said we want you to change this in this version. And same would apply to the other version. The locations are different.
Okay, so would you like us to consider the contract with Des Moines first, since that's the one that we received?
It's up to games up. That's up to, I don't, I'm worried about procedures. I don't want us to,
Well, we have both contract. I'm not
we have
sure.
both.
So it's again, common source text. I think we can process the objections, the recommendations and the concerns that staff have for both
Okay,
simultaneously, because as we observed last time, if any of us make a comment, it's going to apply to both contracts. We at the end of the day, we need a separate motion for each because they're different contracts, but the critique will be a common thread.
all right, so.
I think we're going to ping pong between the 3 of us because all 3 of us had some proposed suggestions to you and to Quest. I'm going to start with the term of the charter itself. Section 1, sub B, item 2, beginning with term. So the term of this charter shall be 5 years commencing on July 1, 2025. Have some concerns about whether or not that's an accurate statement because the charter contract will be signed today commencing, they're using a year as a planning year. So the anticipated start date, we want to make sure that those dates sync up, and I'm going to defer to Janet about whatever suggestions she would have to make sure that the state board doesn't inadvertently give them a 6th year. That's the concern. If year 1 is a planning year, when does the charter start? When does the contract start? Can they plan without a contract? So that's the concern. The proposal that I would have, Janet, or people who actually do this for a living, correct me if I'm wrong, would be to start on July 1, 2024. The ending date of June 30th, 2029 is the same. So the amendment would be to start it, recognizing that this first year will be a planning year. But they've then got a contract with the state board under which to plan. So having a start date of July 1 of 2024 rather than a start date of July 1 of 2025. And that would sort of harmonize the parenthetical reference to being a planning year. Did I correctly state that?
Yes.
I'm just looking back at the Civica contract that we just approved, and it's actually, just for reference, that contract commences on July 1st, 2024, and it's defined in their contract that the 2024-2025 year will constitute as a planning year with the anticipated start date on July 1st, 2025. And the contract shall expire at midnight on June 30, 2029, unless terminated or extended pursuant to the terms hereof.
So that would be the recommendation for charters that have a planning year. You have to have a contract in place in order to plan, in order to commit resources. So if they want to, the staff's recommendation is to amend the start of the term to July 1 of 2024. That would harmonize it with Civica.
Yes. License.
The second change in this portion of the contract renewal applications are required by October 1, 2028. Everything after that is consistent with some other unidentified state's law. It doesn't really match with Iowa charter school law. There's no, mediation is always an option. The chart 256E is silent as to dispute resolution. It contains no authority for a hearing before an administrative law judge. You, the state board, and you alone decide whether or not to renew or revoke. So my proposal is to strike, staff's proposal is to strike everything after October 1, 2028. Of course, mediation, of course, dispute prevention is part of differentiated accountability. It's part of the system, it's part of school improvement writ large. So mediation is not necessary to reference because that's standard operating procedure with the school improvement team. And the references to the administrative law judge is extra statutory. It conflicts with chapter 256E. So that's the staff's second recommendation for that that item number 2.
So we're saying they operate out of contract for half a year? In the sentence prior to the strike?
So that's the renewal because their contract expires
right
June 30th, 2029. The renewal for the term starting July 1, 2029, the renewal application, and this is statutory, is due October 1. So of 2028. So it syncs up with Iowa law. They can't apply on June 30th, 2029 to renew July 1, 2029.
Still have their contract through 29.
That just gives the board time to, department time to get all the materials ready for the board's consideration for renewal.
Also gives the charter school time to know if they're still in business.
Students, it gives time for students to be able to find their educational opportunities if it doesn't get renewed.
And I guess, should that be in all of these?
Well, again, that common thread, standard contract, sample contract or not, the October 1 is a statutory drop dead date. So does it need to be in the contract or not? It's a nice to do if it is. I've got no objection to it being, but
I'm talking about, can the provision that says the school can continue from July 1 to December 31. This is the only one that was in, isn't it, so far? Yeah. Because the contract ended June 30, 2029. But we're saying here, well, we can keep going, and because we're in the school year, I get it. The school year isn't syncing up with the last year of the contract, right? Or am I misreading this?
no, I think I was misunderstanding what your reference was to. So the school year in Iowa, charter or not, begins July 1 and ends June 30th. So if a charter is revoked or non-renewed, it would expire June 30th, 2029. So I see your point about that 6 months. So
yeah,
my proposal would be to strike that sentence also.
Okay. That makes sense to me now.
Beginning with renewal.
Because they should be renewing for that.
Yeah. So the
Starting
renewal
July
is the very
1.
next. The
Okay,
renewal is the
all
very
right.
next sentence.
So that the strike would come after the word sponsor?
Yes.
Okay.
And then we keep the sentence, or do we just start renewal application, or do we need the sentence renewal applications are required by October 1st? Do we strike that as well? Because that's.
It's in statute. It's
Right.
It's a nice to do. It's not a need to do. I've got no objections to it either staying or being stricken.
Is it necessary at this point? Do you feel, Brian?
The only concern I would ever have is if the law changes, but we don't change the contract, which governs, but hopefully they would be doing this way sooner than September 30th. So they would know. I would guess you probably don't need it based on what Bernie Mays just said.
So what you're proposing is that we just strike, including that sentence, therefore renewal applications are required by October 1, 2020.
Well,
I think it's a question more than a.
I think if we keep it, it just needs to be reworded a little bit. To take the therefore off and just say renewal application would be due by October 1st, 2028. I mean,
It's really not a therefore, but.
right.
Does it add anything?
It doesn't, but in the interest of sort of like reading for completeness, Dr. Klein pointed out something that I would like to bring to your attention is something that I last saw when I was reading residential leases, and that's a month-to-month renewal. The term will automatically be extended on a month-to-month basis until the charter has been renewed, non-renewed, or terminated. That's inconsistent with Iowa law. It terminates at a fixed date and time if it's non-renewed.
So that would come out too.
Yes.
So everything after the closed parent, June 30, 2029 period closed parent come out.
It's a combination of it has to come out or it's not necessary to be there.
Yeah. I'd say let's delete it all.
Yeah.
So deleting after December 2029.
June 30, 2029 in the parentheses.
Friends, all the way up there.
So it would read the term of this charter shall be 5 years commencing on July 1, 2024 and ending on July 30, 2029 unless terminated sooner as provided herein or extended. The 2024-2025 year constitutes a planning year with the anticipated start date on July 1st, 2025 and ending, no.
No, that's right. That was right.
Yeah, and then
2025 and ending on
June 30, 2029. Period. Then nothing. Everything else is out either because it's superfluous or it's not right.
Yes.
I even question whether in the parens you need the and ending on June 30, because you've already stated that up at the beginning. You're just clarifying in the parens that 2024-25 school year is a planning year with anticipated start of July 1, 2025.
But again, not necessary, but it's it's expectation management with your community, with their community.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, what else do you have for us?
So, post termination provisions. This is
Is that?
so it is on page
E.
Yeah, E. Page 7 spilling over into page 8 of the PDF. Second sentence.
Wait a minute. E only has 4.
Wait, what section?
So section 1, subsection E. 3. In the event of and page 7 through 8, in the event or termination, non-renewal, this is the winding down provision, what happens if a charter fails, and this is actually sort of a sophisticated plan. But one suggestion that I would have, there is a word, all sponsor property and improvements, furnishings and equipments. That would imply that the DE, that the department or the state board owns some stuff. We won't, you won't. I would suggest striking the word sponsor. So it's just all property and improvements, furnishing and equipment purchased with public funds shall automatically revert to the state board, and then the state board just distributes them and winds down the school. or appoints a receiver or whatever else is in our plans for winding down a charter that's either non-renewed or terminated. So my suggestion, just to clarify expectation, the department and neither the board own any of this stuff. It's not sponsor property. It is the charter's property. If they fail, the state board and the department take it over, manage, wind down. But just want to clarify that none of this is ours to begin with and yours to begin with.
I think that the term sponsor is sprinkled, but inferring that the sponsor owns property is kind of sprinkled in there. It's more than once.
Sponsor is a defined term.
Sponsor is defined as the State Board of Education. Yeah,
Yes.
and this is the only,
The authorizer.
yeah, so this is the only instance where I thought that the term sponsor, meaning state board, was inconsistent with what the state board would, with the state board's not going to purchase textbooks.
Yeah, and I'm referring to the rest of part 3 there. After it says all sponsor property, then it also refers to ownership by the sponsor. There's, then improvements of the sponsor. I mean, I think that whole part there might need to be removed.
So that's for a later date discussion, because I think that there might be after, like, charter wound down, state board / department take over. If we make any improvement, if the state board or the department make any improvements to the facilities, to the things that are taken over as part of winding down, that's what that refers to. So my suggestion is strike that the single word, with that single word stricken, the rest of the paragraph works, at least from my perspective.
And which word is that again, Thomas?
Sponsor in the second sentence, beginning all sponsor property and improve.
All property.
So all property.
Okay.
What about equipment purchase with public funds? Should that be stricken?
Because these are
Yes, they are public.
these are public funds. If there's private philanthropy, it becomes public funds because the charter is,
Because they,
unless it's a restricted donation, and then we can sort that out in the very, very unlikely event that this charter has to wind down. And so there are a couple other,
the appeal, is that to us that's talking about?
yes, and there's no,
We don't have that authority, right?
you have the authority to non-renew or terminate, and there is an appeal to state district court. Refusing to grant an application is unappealable. Non-renewing a contract might be other agency action that's appealable, but the state law takes care of this. State law does not require an administrative law judge hearing before the board takes action.
So the word sponsor comes out of the second sentence where it starts any unencumbered public funds. Is that all stricken or is it just stay?
So the entire sentence, so post-termination provisions, item 3, the only word that I recommend coming out is sponsor in the second sentence. So the appeal resolved would be if there's an appeal to state district court. And there's a stay granted, and so that would be addressed through the Iowa Administrative Procedure Act.
Okay, and is there such a thing as property and improvements of the sponsor?
And that's the point that Ms. Boyd made. If they're property, like they become property under this provision as part of their winding down, if we make improvements such as we really have to address some facilities issues to make it safe, the property and improvements of the sponsor, that's what I think this contemplates. In the interest of time, I'd like to move on to some of the other items that Dr. Klein and Ms. Boyd have identified. I'm going to move to section 3, which is students. H, which is exceptional students, students with disabilities. This is, again, largely self-executed. There's a there's two references to timelines. So transfer students transferring records within 10 days. So this paragraph upon enrollment deals with transfer students. There are three concerns, one of which could be, two of which could be addressed with, unless otherwise required by law. And that's the 30 days to have an IEP meeting for a transfer student coming in. And then the, immediately prior to that, records transfer from the attending school to the charter within 10 days or unless otherwise required by law. If the law requires a faster timeline, say the student is homeless or in foster care, the cadence or the requirements are accelerated. And then the last suggestion, the sponsor shall be invited to and may attend IEP meetings. I don't think that there is any place for state board members to attend IEP meetings. There's the ordinary course would operate. There would be a charter school representative at the meeting. I recommend striking that entire sentence. So for the two timelines, 10 days and 30 days, my recommendation would be to insert unless otherwise provided by law. And then strike the last sentence. The state board as a sponsor, nowhere in chapter 256E does it provide the sponsor with the right to attend or the duty to attend IEP meetings.
What about that next sentence, Thomas?
That's on our list as well.
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
And so.
Shut up.
So this accurately states -3, with the exception of 3 words, how we would expect IEP teams to be staffed. The charter school and the district of residence, the AEA of residence ultimately being responsible for some of these costs. We would expect districts of residence to be invited. The words that we've identified as an AEA representative of the sponsor. So the staff proposing striking of the sponsor. This again gets you out of the business of going to IEP meetings. So section 4, which is funding finance or financial accountability is the title. So A, numeral 2, there are multiple suggestions that the finance team has. And I will let Dr. Klein walk through those to make sure that nothing is missed. But it goes back to it goes back to what law once said before amendment and what other states might do. We just want to make sure that that this provision is right for Iowa.
I would just propose striking some of these. So in item 2, sorry, in item 1. Item 1, and then Roman numeral 4, we could strike that one.
I'm sorry, you said
And then Roman
one or A2?
Sorry, A1, 4.
Oh, okay.
Not two.
If the schools.
The school students or programs meet, okay.
So strike that, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
And then for item 2, we could keep items 6 and 7, but 1 through 4, it just doesn't follow the way that we do this in Iowa. Do you want to keep? It's 6 and 7, it should be 5 and 6, but it's 6 and 7. Do we want to keep those in there? We could keep those in there. They're not incorrect, but without other context, it maybe doesn't make sense to keep those in there either. I'm okay with keeping in the 10 monthly payments of the September through June at the very beginning under item 2. That statement is correct. But items 1, 2, 3, 4 do not represent our schedule.
So you recommend striking all of them or keeping the ones labeled 6 and 7?
I guess a soft recommendation would be to strike everything below the sentence or the paragraph about the 10 payments. Just because without other context, the last 2 don't make much sense to include.
I agree with striking.
It's 1 through 6. Even though it
7.
says, well, there's not a bottom.
Yeah.
Labeled 7, but.
Okay.
You know, my face is item 3 is something good. This isn't true.
So this 4B3 relates to federal grants. And dealing with indirect costs. There's a specific federal methodology for when indirect costs are allowable and under what grants, and it varies based on which grant. The public charter school program grant is a specific grant with a specific methodology. That's not limited to, the charter might, once this contract's approved, the charter might be eligible for grants beyond this. So the recommendation, because this doesn't add anything to and might inadvertently box them in, the proposal would be to strike. Because the statute already allows them to apply for available federal funds. When you apply for available federal funds, the strings come along with the funds, including requirements, program-specific requirements upon approved and allowable indirect costs. So that's the suggestion. That would reduce some unnecessary complexity for them, not inadvertently box them into a particular grant. So the recommendation to give the charter maximum flexibility to access federal funds would be to strike.
So what are you striking? Just
strike
E3.
Roman numeral 3. Not Roman numeral 3, Arabic numeral 3. Ensuring that all grant indirect cost rates are appropriated if allowed to the sponsor. Again, not appropriating to the sponsor. It would be to this fits in other states and other contexts. It doesn't fit here. The state administrative code gives them max flexibility. So let's not box them in. So we're in the Bell app here, 3 small recommendations. Oh,
Can I ask a question?
Always.
Do we even need this section at all around federal grants?
Well,
For grants submitted through the sponsor? Are they going to submit grants through, federal grants through us?
The State Department of Education receives all federal grants and subgrants to school districts or charter schools.
Okay.
so going back up to the definition of sponsor, sponsor being the State Board of Education, IDOE being defined as the Department of Education. In sort of in the interest of wholeness, there's some grants that the board would apply for that the department would administer. There's some grants that the department receives on a formula basis that would just be allocated out. So in case the board has to apply, it's most protective to have this in here. It's belts and suspenders. State rule takes care of federal grants. This makes it adds to, it doesn't take away from 1 and 2. Arabic numeral 1 and 2 under this section expand or at least acknowledge that this is a possibility. 3 was the one that I was concerned about inadvertently boxing them in.
Okay.
So section 11. Pay, we would need, similar to a comment earlier, a prior applicant, we'd need contact information. And then there was references to appendices, the ESP provider contract with academia, and an ESP provider contract with Opportunity Education Foundation. Those were listed as appendices but not provided. We can either strike the references to the appendices or defer until they provide. My recommendation is to strike. And because they can contract with whomever they wish, if they box themselves into choosing these two, then they contract and are responsible for the contracts that they make. But since it's not a part of the application and since it's referenced but not before you, I can't recommend that you approve an appendices you don't see. So my recommendation to the board, staff, correct me if I'm wrong, my recommendation would be to strike those two references. The application itself referenced in the appendices you've had, it was before you at your last meeting. So I feel comfortable and confident in that. The governance documents, staff.
We had not done that in the past on a contract, had the board policies or the governing board policies. That's what I assume they're.
So the annual performance targets are actually in the PDF. They were in the board packet. The application you've seen before and approved. So with that metric, the governance documents, management contract if applicable, and 5 and 6, strike, with that understanding, strike 2, 3, 5, and 6.
Where are we at? Oh, in the appendices?
Yes, so it's the page 35 of the PDF.
So we're just keeping 1 and 4?
Keeping 1 and 4 and renumbering.
Okay. Questions from the board?
Under where you were on the federal grants before and you wanted to strike number 3 just a couple minutes ago. C says the school shall not charge tuition or fees except those fees allowed by statute that are normally charged by other public schools in the district. Is statute too narrow? Would that exclude rules that we might promulgate or let's say applicable law or something? So it's a little thing, but
So give me the page.
Section.
it's under the federal grants.
Okay.
Looks like.
I don't have page numbers.
Page 16.
Right.
All right.
You have picture numbers?
So that,
I have picture numbers somewhere.
well,
You say 6, you said 16? Oh, I do see. And when I scroll, it comes up there.
Oh, okay. Oh, we need page numbers.
So,
So he's talking about this. Restriction not charge.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah.
so my response to that is allowable by statute. The statute specifies what fees are allowable. Rules specify when those fees must be waived. Those rules are required by statute.
No, it's still statute.
It's still
All right.
like it's
That's fine. I
it's
don't want to belabor it.
it's an undividable whole. And then there's declaratory orders interpreting statute. So I think that it's broad and were I writing it, it would be different. As it is, it's not mission critical.
Okay. Thank you.
Then that would be.
Just a comment, this is a little later when it talks about financial records, reports and monitoring. Section 3, Romanet 4, it does talk about the 990 that I was talking about way when we did the first one for 501c3. So if they are one, they have to produce that to us. Of course, it's available online too, but just for template purposes, I think maybe that would be a good thing to keep.
So they must be organized under Iowa Code Chapter 504 as a nonprofit corporation. If they become recognized by the IRS, they will provide.
Yes.
Yes.
okay, well, let's hear from Quest.
They are here. We have,
Yes, good afternoon. This is Catherine Fuente, Senior Director with Opportunity Education, and we accept all the revisions and recommendations.
Made my job easier.
Both contracts.
And just to accelerate this, same comments, both contracts, with the exception that there's no location cleanup necessary for the Des Moines contract. There is location cleanup necessary for the Cedar Rapids contract. And with that, the department would make the same recommendations for the Cedar Rapids contract as it would for the Des Moines contract.
But separate votes are necessary.
Separate votes are necessary.
Okay, so we have changes in section 1 with July 1st start date of 2024 and striking language after June 30th, 2029. Section 1, E3, we're modifying that. Instead of all sponsored property, it's all property. Section 3H, upon enrollment. Striking, or we're inserting unless otherwise required by law. We're not inviting sponsors to the IEP meetings. And that. In section 4A1 4, we're striking that. Section 4A2, we're striking 1 through 7. Section 4B3, the federal grants, we're striking 3. Inserting contract info for Cedar Rapids. And in the appendices, we're striking T3, 5, and 6.
And we needed to add notice information as well, correct?
Correct.
Address.
Yeah, that's contact information.
Yeah.
All right. Somebody,
Those changes, I'll move approval.
I'll second.
okay, moved by Brian, second by Cass. Any further discussion?
This is for Cedar.
This is for, Cedar.
Oh, for Cedar. For Cedar Rapids, correct. That's what the motion. was.
Any other questions? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Aye. That was an aye. Okay, aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. You need a recommendation or motion for Des Moines.
I move that we going with the changes.
Second.
Second.
Moved by Brooke. Give Mike the second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Those opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. It's 11:55. We're breaking for lunch.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
We have one more?
Yeah.
2 more. Scholarship prep.
We'll reconvene in 30 minutes.
And we have our person here.
I should.
I'm not sure which we were supposed to be.
Okay, we have scholarship prep.
And I'm still Janet Boyd, and we have Jason Watts with us. He's your scholarship prep person. One thing I would say about the 2 contracts, again, scholarship prep had 2 applications. They had the elementary, which was it was K-5, and then they have the middle school, 6-8. Both of the contracts are the 6-8 contract. They are identical except for grades. So I think in the board packet, elementary came first and then the middle school was to be considered that way. But when we're considering these and making any, if there's any strike and replace or whatever with the contract, it would be true for both contracts. So from our point of view, that we have no additions, subtractions, or changes in this contract, the department's point of view. And Dr. Klein concurred with that. So
this is the contract that probably most faithfully follows / duplicates / drags and drops the underlying code and underlying rules. There are no inconsistencies. There are no things that we identified that were missing. Nothing mission critical. The one comment is since you have both contracts are the middle school contract, the performance framework in both is the performance framework for the middle school. So I would invite the charter representative to sort of identify what the performance framework is that should be considered for the elementary grade band, just so that the board is aware of it. But other than that, my colleague and I are open for such questions as you may have. My only recommendation is to inquire of the elementary performance.
Any questions from the board concerning this contract?
Under oversight, Roman numeral 11. A. It seems to be putting some maybe soft restrictions on our oversight as the state board.
This is, so Roman numeral
11A.
Paragraph A, that is.
Those adhere to, as long as we adhere to the contract, don't unduly inhibit their autonomy. As long as it's consistent with this chapter, I think they mean the code there.
Yes, so this is Roman numeral 11, paragraph A is consistent with / duplicative of code section 256E10 sub 1. So that not unduly restrict, that's a code soft restriction on the board's authority, not contractual. And again, unduly would depend on the facts and circumstances for each case.
I noticed that their insurance limits were much higher. But that's fine, I guess.
That might be, you know, their management organizations out of California.
They did what they need, probably, California.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tuberculosis clearance, that's the first time I think I saw that.
Yeah, I hadn't
One
seen
of
that
the-
previously.
In
Thought maybe that was
Roman
something-
numeral 18, maybe?
Maybe somebody's required out in California.
That might be, because it.
That's what I was thinking.
Maybe.
Used to be required in the state of Iowa, and I don't believe it is.
Oh, okay.
Used to have a.
Oh, really?
18B.
Yeah. I remember getting TB tests when I was a kid,
It just struck me that, I mean,
maybe for school. I don't know.
that's not trying to limit it in any way.
I don't know.
There's lots of requirements.
Yeah, we don't.
Shots and vaccinations and, right, not just tuberculosis.
And again, this might be an artifact of and other states' requirements, you know, that it's making a comeback. So TB is bouncing back, so it's something that
I've heard that, yeah.
I've got no objection to there.
Yeah, I mean, if it's, they want to include more stuff, I think.
So yeah, it's discretionary on their part. It's not something that would require it doesn't, they've got the authority to do
They
that.
keep it consistent between their, you know.
In section Roman numeral 11I, ABC. Those are just code, I mean, we're supposed to do all these things. But I think we're required to do all these things anyway.
Yes, again, this is a duplication of administrative rule and statute. So the state board's responsibilities regarding renewal, that's a correct statement of the law.
And that there's nothing about any of that that would be private. What if it was, I don't know, rampant discriminatory or sexual harassment or something? Do we have to, there are rules that protect the complainants and thing? I mean, we could
So,
still
I mean-
redact things, I take it?
Yes, you could. And I think the board has been through that enterprise with Davenport before, when there was some student specific violations.
I just don't want to like this overrides that is all I'm saying.
You know, there's a global statement in charter school law about the charter being bound by applicable confidentiality law. And so
Okay,
that would spill
okay.
over into this. So they're reporting to us.
That answers my question. Thanks.
Other questions?
Oh, sorry, I lied. Roman numeral 5A. So that last sentence. The charter school will, assist or whatever, be as helpful as possible. That's not in the statute, right? I mean, does that bother you, that helpful is, I don't know what that means. Unless it's my mom at.
And, I think as helpful as possible, that's just a business rule that the department would apply anyway. We're not.
Like best efforts.
We're not going to do it. Yeah, it's,
Okay, all right.
we're not going to come during the assessments. We're not going to do a site visit during ISASP time or a screening window or the day before break, unless it's best efforts. It's
their best efforts,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So there's no changes on this one?
No, but we're gonna turn it over to our scholarship prep, who's here, who's gonna talk to us about performance standards for elementary.
Good morning, everyone. Or actually, it's afternoon. Still 10:30 in California, but as it pertains to performance standards, we used data from the most local elementary school, which would be Studebaker Elementary. And so the actual annual targets for the performance framework are just slightly different than what you would see in the 6-8 contract, just based on the statewide data metrics for Studebaker. So we based everything off of that school's performance as we built those annual targets.
Huh? What's that? Are you looking for?
Oh, I just.
Oh, Brody Mills, okay.
So Janet.
That's for the middle.
Confused.
So Ms. Boyd has a copy of the performance framework for the elementary grade band.
So, yeah.
She's going to walk through the numbers just so that you can see.
And I can only see what I have on my screen, but, starts out with assessment participation, English language arts. I've got an annual target of 100% on participation in mathematics. Does that align with the?
Yes.
Then the next one is slightly different. You've got 47. So your average school achievement, ELA, is 47% on your contract, 48% on this contract. It's 1 point higher on the elementary for math. It's 46 on your contract, 47 on the elementary. And student academic the proficiency, ELA, you have 51% and I have 50%. Academic proficiency in mathematics, I have 46%. It looks like you have 46% the same. We're looking at, looks like we're pretty much the same on the next proficiency, the achievement gap. For ELA, achievement gap, math is the same. Then student academic growth in ELA is 48% for the elementary and 35% for the middle school. And then for the elementary, growth in mathematics is 35% and 35%. And looks like that. The rest of it looks pretty much the same. Benchmark status. Okay, so looks like we have an additional, now they have for the elementary, they do have the literacy screener. So their benchmark status for literacy screener, this would be an addition to, this would be added to that chart. And they're looking to have 65% or higher, meaning benchmark in the early literacy screener. So then attendance, looks like our attendance is the goal is the same. Conditions for learning data, you've got 50% on your chart and they're saying 55 on the elementary. 55% or greater. Nutrition looks to be the same. And then same here. Yep, yeah, it's pretty much the same all the way through. And then I would remind you, the last section of that chart talks about homeless and foster youth. You recall that their target population is homeless and foster youth. And then when Jason talks about Studebaker Elementary, their target location is the south side. So.
And just as a lay reader, the targets that have been selected for the elementary school they're within the zone of reasonableness for comparability to Studebaker Elementary. They make sense to me as a lay reader.
Any comments from our guests from Scholarship Prep?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for the time that you were all putting into this. Special thanks to Jenna and her team. If our contract looks pretty solid, it's really thanks to them and the work that they did on their end to kind of work with us to make sure that it was in alignment to Iowa State Code, et cetera. And so again, kudos to her and her team. And we're excited to get going. Lastly, on the data, we used on average about a 5% increase for our baselines based on what Studebaker's results were. So and that's very conservative, of course, but that's our baseline expectation.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion.
Can I ask just one, Thomas, should the reference in the middle of 11A on page 11, where it says of this chapter, should that be to chapter 256E? I mean, it's almost like it's a quote from the code, but there's no, it doesn't say.
So there's two potential relevant chapters. There's chapter 19 of the administrative code and chapter 256E. So I think that could be a wordsmithing, the concept solid, that could be a wordsmithing decision that Mr. Watts and the department take care of on final execution of the document.
Okay. I would move approval then of Scholarship Prep. Charter school contract, the ES, is that the one we're looking at?
Elementary school.
Elementary.
Okay, it's been moved.
Second.
Moved by Brian, second by Cindy to approve the Scholarship Prep ES contract. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. In a motion for Scholarship Prep. MS.
I'll move the approval of scholarship prep for the middle school contract.
Moved by Brooke. Is there a second?
I'll second.
One of the best players overall in this.
I thought it was on airplane mode.
Second by Cass.
And my phone.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Opposed, same sign now. All right, motion is carried. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
So I accidentally left my cell phone on once while I was judging a high school debate round, and it went off during the middle of the round, and it turned out to be Discover Card calling to tell me that somebody was using my card to try to pay their child support. So I was kind of happy that I accidentally left my phone on because child support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good.
Wow.
A lot of work here.
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about some goals.
Oh, all right.
Let me see where we were on here.
It's a pleasure to be with you again, to be talking about goals and outcomes for your strategic plan. As you recall, we held work sessions and had great conversations around the direction the board would like to head as far as the strategic plan. The work sessions were held on September 14th and 15th, and then again another one on November 15th. At the January 11th board meeting, the board approved the vision and mission statements. And you spent a little bit of time talking about the goals, made some suggestions, and asked for an additional goal. So one of the requests that you made was you asked that the order of the goals be rearranged. So you can see the materials that were provided to you. The goals have been rearranged as per your request. And also then there was a fifth goal proposed by Cassandra, which I included in your materials. And since then have had some revisions and suggestions for revisions. So I do have a document that has revisions to goal 1 proposed from what you have, as well as goal 5. So I know in the essence of time, President Robbins, if there's a better way to do this, to collect feedback from the board members, I'd welcome that as well.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, this is a revision to what's in our packet
Yes.
you're handing out.
Yes.
Okay.
So maybe let's start with the goals that were in the packet. So the first goal is to creating a safe, healthy, and welcoming learning environment. This was a goal that was added by the board and moved to the top of the list. And one of the outcomes would be all Iowa schools will work with their learners to foster a culture and climate in which they feel safe and supported, and bullying and harassment do not exist. I did receive suggestions for revisions, and that is that document that I just handed out to you. And it would change the language a bit of the first goal, but then add additional outcomes. So I'm going to move on to goal 2, and then we can come back and have some conversation if you'd like. So goal 2 is ensuring equity in education by narrowing and closing achievement and opportunity gaps. This goal is very closely aligned to your last strategic plan and one of the goals within that strategic plan. The outcomes, however, are really specific in what we're going to see differently in classrooms and in schools. So for example, the first one, preschool through 12th grade classrooms will use high quality instructional materials. We're just really pointing out what we want to see
in schools moving forward. B would be the use of evidence-based instructional practices. It really calls to our focus of what we would like to see. C, ironically, charter school authorization and oversight processes support improved student proficiency and growth. So we're going to continue to refine those processes to support charter schools moving forward. D, pre-service and in-service teachers will be prepared to teach in classrooms where all students are supported with high-quality universal instruction and supports and feel a sense of belonging. Just really want to make sure that when teachers graduate and enter their first jobs and teachers that are in schools feel like they have the skills and the supports to be successful. E, the academic standards will establish high expectations for student achievement. And in the director's report earlier this morning, she talked about the revision to the academic standards that we're undergoing currently with mathematics and ELA. And this process will continue and come before the board for approval. And then F, support kindergarten readiness for all students and really taking a look at preschool opportunities and the quality of those. The third goal, ensuring high quality teachers and other educators are in every classroom and high quality leaders are in every school. This is, the outcomes are, you've heard a lot about. That first one is we want to align literacy instruction to the science of reading and really is going to be our focus moving forward. So across the state, we're all have the same practices, have the same vocabulary, have the same approach as we engage in literacy instruction. This second one, teacher, other educator, and leader programs will prepare teachers, other educators, and leaders to utilize evidence-based practices and meet world-class standards. Again, that teacher preparation program, making sure that teachers leave the programs and feel successful in order to teach in schools. And recruitment and retention efforts increase the number of teachers in the profession in Iowa. And we've had engaged with our stakeholders in a number of conversations around this, and we want to improve our methods of data collection as well as our opportunities for people to enter the profession and be retained. The fourth goal is providing all students with multiple pathways for post-secondary success through high-quality career and academic programs and planning. And our outcomes, the first would be all students have robust individualized career exploration and planning experiences that enhance career awareness, aspirations, and planning. The second one, secondary and post-secondary educational institutions support students through industry-aligned career pathways. And then the third one speaks to the opportunity for students to earn an industry-recognized credential or college credit before graduation. And these you will find are aligned to our Every Student Succeeds Act and the revisions that we've made to that in our post-secondary readiness threshold or measurement as well. And then the fifth goal. And I am going to read the revised one because I do like that one better. Promoting a vibrant work culture of innovation and collaboration where all feel valued, engaged, and empowered to achieve our strategic goals. Cassandra, do you want to speak to that just a little bit, what you were thinking as you proposed that one?
And I do want to say a huge thank you to Kim. She worked very hard and drafted the original proposal that came in your packet. And she and I did not have an opportunity to work together just because of my schedule. So I made that commitment to the board that we would do that. And then things got a little crazy for me. So thank you for trying to work inside my brain, knowing we had just a very quick conversation. Again, the intent here that I had proposed to the board in our last conversation is that our first 4 goals were very intentionally focused on supporting the external aspects of our educational system, which is very important. But I'm very passionate about making sure that we have goal number 5 to support our team here that is making things happen and supporting the system from an internal perspective. And that is, I think, unique to our work in this strategic plan. which we have an opportunity to do maybe for a first time. And so in proposing these two concepts to you that you see here newly today, prioritizing ongoing learning and development initiatives that enable staff to enhance their skills, knowledge, and capabilities as an outcome. I know we don't control budget, but I give that to you as an idea because we are all about education. And so I think as a board that it's really important for us that we prioritize learning and education for our team in order to position them at a point to be on top of trends and best practices as they are supporting bringing things forward for our system and supporting our schools, our community colleges, and looking for what's best in Iowa's educational system. So that's what the intent is there, within the means of what the budget can support. But I think it's important that they know from us that we want to see them develop and support their career pathways here within the department. The second thing, and again, as I reflected on this, thinking about what we want to see for the future of education within the state of Iowa, thinking about alignment, thinking about all of the change that's happened. And I know that there's some words here, implement a recognition and maybe an award system that specifically acknowledges and celebrates innovative ideas and collaborative efforts. There is, I think, a significant opportunity for us to be able to recognize in a new or creative way all of the wonderful things that the staff does that maybe we don't get to put a light on in how they're changing the approach to education in Iowa, or again, some of these trends or best practices that where we can be a platform. And I see Jeremy in the room here as we talk about being part of the Community College Council and all of the data and all of those cool things that we can promote the work of the team. And I think having a way to just highlight the innovation and maybe inspire the team even to look for new ways to collaborate is kind of a cool thing, again, that the board could recognize and elevate in a way that can impact culture and the department. So that was kind of part of my thinking. So outside the box, I know a little bit different, but that's where I was coming from. So thank you.
I like what you have here. I would just maybe learn if we adopt something like this, somewhere it's got to be something about referring to the staff at the Department of Ed.
Yep.
The departments where there's something in there, so when it goes out to the public, it's, you know, what we're discussing, what we're trying to accomplish.
Should these outcomes be in collaboration with the Department of Ed? I mean, that would be the antecedent that we're not doing this on our own. I mean, we'd need you on board with that. And I don't want to usurp your role either. I mean, sounds like part of your job description.
It is, but I think we have really strong synergy between the department's goals and the board's goals. This is reflected in the department's goals, and I appreciate the prioritization of the board of that goal as well. So if the board is open to incorporating it in its goals, and we always benefit from an additional ideas. And just a couple of line edits here, though. Department team members are provided. And then provided learning opportunities and development opportunities to enhance their skills, knowledge, and capabilities, per your good point. And we do obviously work to develop very strategic and individualized and aligned to our priorities, professional learning pathways. And then opportunities to acknowledge and celebrate team members with innovative ideas and collaborative efforts. A few of those are our internal communications, and some of our external communications are biweekly update where we have staff recognitions that's communicated to the entire department that you're all copied on, as well as any core project completions or recognition of specific individuals who contribute to big projects that get over the finish line, or reporting requirements or data deadlines that get over the finish line. But we, of course, welcome any additional ideas the board has on how we can further celebrate our team members, and just really grateful that you all are prioritizing this conversation too.
So I would,
I want to make some comments on it.
please do, okay.
So the outcomes for one, prioritize that as our, well, there's only one outcome that was listed under that. And so if it's the top one, we had this one outcome. I thought, well, there's a void there. And so what you see is, thinking about student safety and the culture of the school. Those are the things that came to my mind. And once again, it's not something that we're doing. I guess the caveat is that we're assisting schools in their efforts to do these things. And so this is just kind of a list of my suggestions as far as expanding what school safety means in light of modern day environment in which we find ourselves in. So when I was talking earlier with Kim, that Cass submitted her ideas recently, and I just gave Kim my ideas this morning. And so what I want us as a board is to reflect on the originals, the suggested revisions, and then to come back at our next meeting and to finalize, because I'm sure that others have ideas that they may not want to think about to contribute, if that makes sense. When I was going through, I mean, to me, there was some wordsmithing, but in goal area 2, I really didn't have an issue with any of those concepts. Either did I in goal area 3 or goal area 4. Those were, in my eyes, those were fine. Maybe change some wordsmithing, but I think this is an opportunity to provide feedback to Kim 2 weeks prior to our next meeting, so that all that can be collaborated and be sent out to us, so we have a chance to look at and reflect before we meet and finalize, because the goal next time we meet is to finalize. So if you have input on the original goals or suggested revisions as supplied by Cass and myself, or you want to present other concepts for those 2 weeks prior to our next meeting, so, which is March
21st.
Anything else anything else that people want to discuss about goals this morning or this afternoon? Sound like a plan?
Sounds like a plan. Thank you for your feedback. Yeah, and I appreciate that and look forward to continuing to work on these goals.
All right. So now we have a teacher of the year. Do you leave after lunch? Oh.
She had to get a cookie because somebody denied
Somebody took
her.
our cookies. I'll let she saw through.
Trying to get her in trouble. Our March meeting, are we going anywhere for a March meeting?
We are working on that.
Florida? What? We're doing spring break?
Oh, yeah.
No.
I could be remote from here.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Gwen Nagel. I'm an administrative consultant within the Bureau of Learner Strategies and Supports. And as part of my assignment in my duties is to oversee the Teacher of the Year program. Ever since 1958, which may be before some of you were born, the state of Iowa has selected one teacher to serve as an educational ambassador representing the voices of all teachers as they travel the state, supporting educational platforms, elevating the education community, and advocating for continuous improvement of educational practices. This teacher is chosen because they are considered to be an exceptional individual, one that embodies rethinking school by utilizing innovative teaching practices, demonstrating an ability to reach all students, possessing an ability to collaborate with colleagues, and presents themselves as a leader within and outside of the classroom. The selected Iowa Teacher of the Year will serve in this capacity for one full school year, during which time they will also be given the opportunity to represent the state of Iowa in the National Teacher of the Year program. I'm very pleased to present to you the 2024 Teacher of the Year, Ann Minks. She is a ELL instructor at Hoover High School here in Des Moines.
Thank you, Gwen. All right, good afternoon, Director Snow and members of the board. It's such a privilege for me to be here today. I've spent this school year working with dedicated educators. We're working very hard to provide meaningful experiences for students. My name is Ann Minks, like Gwen said, and I'm humbled to be standing here as the 2024 Iowa State Teacher of the Year, and to be a representative of all teachers and students. I'm also very excited for our partnership. The Board of Education is responsible for building an excellent education system that empowers all students to reach their full potential. This is no easy task, and I want to thank you for your vision and your leadership. I'm here today to share my educational passions and how I believe we can support students in Iowa. But first, I would like to give you a little background about me and how I got into education. It's also a little humorous for me to be standing here today, as I tried very hard for a long time to not become a teacher. You see, education has been a way of life in my family. This is my grandma and her 4 sisters, and they were all teachers in Iowa. I grew up with my grandma saying, "Get your education. No one can ever take that away from you." And then my mom also became a teacher. My aunt became a teacher. And my little sister is also a teacher. So you can see teaching really runs in our family. However, being the kid of a teacher, I did see how much work teaching was. My mom was always carrying her papers around in car rides on the weekends to grade. And we always had to go to the grocery store before school to buy groceries for family and consumer science class. So I admired my mom's passion. She attended many conferences aiming to improve her instruction. But I saw it was a lot of work. She was a teacher for over 30 years in my hometown. When I was in 3rd grade, my older cousin graduated from high school. While I was at her graduation party, I asked her, "Are you going to be a teacher too?" "No, everyone in this family is a teacher. I'm going to do something different." And with that one conversation, I thought to myself, maybe I should be something different too. That's me, by the way, 9 years old. So, as we all know, my plan did not work out, as I'm standing here as a teacher right now. So if I were to tell something to my younger self, I might say, "Dear Ann, you're meant to be a teacher." First of all, I've always loved learning. When I was younger, I was always reading, I was always writing, I was always practicing my math skills. I really couldn't pick one thing to be passionate about because I really just loved the process of learning. And as an educator, I never stopped learning. You can see that as I have gone out through my career, I have pursued numerous endorsements and just tried to kind of keep up with things that I needed to know as a teacher to improve my job. That sometimes resulted in multiple degrees, but I just never stopped learning. And I really enjoy that about teaching. As an educator each year, I have the opportunity to be a curriculum designer. an interventionist, a mentor, a career advisor, a presenter, an instructional coach, a leader, and so many more things. Each year, I have a fresh start. I have the opportunity to apply new learning and research that might change my philosophy. This year, I'm leading the English Language Learner Department to integrate evidence-based literacy practices into our courses. Learning and growing keeps me motivated to provide the best education for students. In addition to learning, I have always had an appreciation of excellence and beauty. I've spent hours playing Legos, taking photos, designing floor plans, and making art. I appreciate being creative and being inspired by the environment around me. As a teacher, I can take my lessons to the next level of beauty and excellence. Take these book covers students designed for their memoir writing in connection with our community partner ArtForce, or integrating social media or science in an English class. I love going beyond the basic. I feel lucky to be inspired by so many students who cross my path as well. This student came to the US as a freshman and exited out of the ELL program in just 3 short years. She is now studying in an aviation program. I appreciate having the opportunity to support students to excel. And in return for connecting with students, I get notes from them that say, "Thank you. Thank you for always helping me and for being so patient." Or, "Thank you for bringing so much positive energy every day. Thank you for always helping me and actually caring if I show up to class or encouraging me." I also get, "I like your smile and your fashion, and you should give us candy." Some days I get to witness a beautiful spark for students. Take this day, for example. This student was in a canoe for the first time ever on our field trip. She yelled, "Miss, take a picture of me." Each day has many moments to be thankful for. So I would tell my younger self, you are meant to be an educator. I know you think you want to be a pharmacist so you can make a lot of money, but education is for you. Every day, you will have the opportunity to learn, appreciate excellence and beauty, and show gratitude. But I won't lie, this is a challenging job, and it's not for the faint of heart. After 16 years in education, I can say that I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. I've seen students go on to college or become runway models in New York City. I've also lost students. But what we do as educators makes an impact on people. It matters. And at the end of the day, being an educator, being in a profession that makes an impact on others matters to me. It's what I'm meant to do. As I think about our upcoming year, you could say that my passion in education is for all things language related. I had to include this, you guys. This is from some of my students from Afghanistan, a typical day. We've got English and Pashto on the desk. So it's just another day in the language classroom. And this makes me think back to the beginning of my teaching career. I was an ELL instructor at East High School just across the street in Des Moines Public Schools. Currently in Des Moines, there are over 100 languages spoken in our district, and students come from all over the world: Thailand, Myanmar, Tanzania, Congo, Honduras, El Salvador, and many more. Our English learners bring wonderful knowledge with them, some learning their 3rd or 4th language as they enter school here. At that time, East typically had an enrollment of over 2,000 students. Of those students, we had over 200 ELL students on our building roster, with 1.5 to 2 teachers to support them in learning English. As a result, even though I was a novice educator at that time, I found myself in a role as an advocate for multilingual students. Within a couple of years, I was supporting many other content area teachers, such as social studies, science, and math, and working with students who were learning English. We organized an after-school book study for teachers to learn more about best practices with English language learners. We also communicated ways to differentiate instruction. We discussed ideas for accommodations for students that did not sacrifice their access to grade level content. This story is not unique to me. There are an increasing number of ELL students across Iowa. Teachers across the state want to provide the best instruction possible for language learners. I would like to support state policies that ensure success for English learners until they reach proficiency. I would also like to work with educational institutions to promote equitable practices and high-quality instruction for ELL students. In addition to English language learners, I would like to focus on evidence-based reading practices. Students deserve to have access to one of the most fundamental rights in education, literacy. Literacy is the key to the future for students. In my classroom, I have students who aspire to be engineers, doctors, business owners, and many other professions. In this article from Harvard Review, Jeffrey Duncan Andrade mentions the importance of providing a material hope. This is the type of hope that comes from a sense of control young people have when they are given the resources to navigate the forces that affect their lives. Quality teaching is the most significant material resource we can offer culturally and linguistically diverse students, or any student really. My hope for the upcoming year is that pre-K to 12th grade teachers have access to and use evidence-based literacy practices. This will help support student achievement and ensure equity in education. Again, thank you, Director Snow, and all members of the board for your time today. I'm excited to begin my journey as the 2024 Iowa State Teacher of the Year. My work as an ambassador for teachers and students across the state gives me energy, and I know that together we can achieve great things. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann, and best wishes for a great year. Are people contacting you yet to get on their?
Yes, I've had an influx of emails the past couple of weeks. I have to talk to Gwen today to figure out what's going on, but I'm very excited about it.
Awesome. Gwen, what's typical for a Teacher of the Year or number of visits in a week or a month?
Oh, my gosh. I think generally she'll be busy constantly. Either out visiting schools or maybe talking to Kiwanis groups or Grandview students who are in the teaching profession, or just, it goes on and on. Plus she gets to do a lot of input and consultation with other teachers of the year from other states. They have lots of opportunities to collaborate and learn from each other.
Sounds exciting.
It is. Yeah.
Congratulations.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes. Okay. We have our legislative liaison of the year.
It's a high honor. You just bestowed upon me. Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Eric St. Clair, the liaison. So just provide just a quick overview of where we're at. And I can run down from our perspective some of my priority bills that we're monitoring. This year, the department introduced or pre-filed 10 bills this session. So we've been closely monitoring those. And I believe you all have a printout of bills in front of you. Perfect. So we'll just run down the cut. We've had great success with our bills so far this year. They've all been introduced in the